Chapter 23-36 Mission accomplished. After seeing these Monarch stars off, Ling Han turned around to face Sun Feng and the others, a smile on his face. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The appearance of the Monarch stars had already said everything. Their appearance had already slapped many faces. The faces of Sun Feng and the others were as red as a monkey's *s. This wasn't so bad for the two demons, as their faces were already red to begin with. As such, it was hard to tell that they were beet red with embarrassment. Their faces merely seemed darker. All of you, return to the residence. Qi Shuang and Yuan immediately roared. They had naturally realized the truth. However, they obviously couldn't cause a commotion now. Otherwise, they would be losing face for the 100 Battles Academy. They couldn't wash their dirty linen in public. Instead, they would close the doors before dealing a beating. Everyone returned to the residence. The teams who had progressed to the second round would naturally be notified about when and where the second round would be held. After arriving back at their residence, Sun Feng and the others were naturally subject to a severe scolding. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others were also reprimanded. This was because they failed to show any team spirit, deciding to part ways immediately after entering the mystery realm. Ling Han didn't retort to this. However, he had already made up his mind. He would remain passive during the second round, and aim to come last out of the 100 academies. When this tournament concluded, he didn't intend to return to the academy either. Firstly, there was nothing in the 100 Battles Academy that interested him. Secondly, he was about to advance to the Ascending Origin tier, a cultivation level that was already above the Academy's upper limit. Thus, he would be kicked out even if he wanted to remain. Thirdly, he was someone who couldn't stay put for too long. He yearned to travel around. For example, he wanted to travel to other dimensions. The more dimensions he traveled to, the more regulations he could comprehend and integrate. As a result, his battle prowess at the same cultivation level would also become stronger. In high-level dimensions, there were freaks who possessed an evolution index of 12. Thus, their battle prowess at the same cultivation level was definitely superior to his. Ling Han was a competitive person, so he naturally wanted to travel through the dimensions to raise his battle prowess to a pinnacle state. After resting for several days, the second round of the tournament finally commenced. The 100 teams were divided into 25 smaller groups, with 4 teams in each group. After a series of battles, the bottom 2 teams from each group would be eliminated, and the top 2 teams would advance. The former teams would fight for the rankings from 51st to 100th, while the latter teams would fight for the rankings from 1st to 50th. As it turned out, the results from the first round did have some small influence. The 100 Battles Academy was placed into the second echelon, and the group that they were assigned to had a team from each of the first, second, third, and fourth echelons. Theoretically speaking, belonging to the second echelon was already a sign of strength. Of the 3 other teams in their group, the team that belonged to the first echelon was naturally filled with confidence. Meanwhile, neither of the 2 other teams had seen Ling Han in action before, so they thought that 100 Battles Academy had only made it to the second echelon thanks to good fortune. The 25 groups commenced their battles at the same time. The first round was the first echelon team versus the fourth echelon team, and then the second echelon team versus the third echelon team. The 2 victorious teams would then battle against each other, after which the victor would directly advance to the next round. The 2 defeated teams would also battle against each other, and the victor of this battle would fight against the loser of the battle between the 2 initial victors. The victor of this last battle would then also advance. Ling Han and the others entered the arena. Their opponent was the 3rd echelon 9 Light Academy. Just like before, the competitors would be prohibited from drawing on any external power. However, solo challenges and ganging up on others were both allowed. The battle would conclude when one team surrendered or lost the ability to fight. "If you don't want to suffer any pain, I urge you to hurry up and surrender," one of their opponents said. "Indeed, that will save us some energy. You've already completed your task by breaking into the top 100. Without you Yuan, you people can't withstand a single attack. I urge you to recognize this fact. Sun Feng and the others all reacted with indifference. They had been severely scolded, so they were naturally feeling strong anger and resentment toward Ling Han and the others. Thus, they decided not to put in any effort. Ling Han chuckled and reached over, grabbing Sun Feng and the others, and launching them toward their opponents. Whoosh! Just how powerful was he? Sun Feng and the others were shrouded by his power of regulations, rendering them helpless as they shot forward like cannonballs. Treating his teammates like weapons? The spectators were all rendered speechless. They had never witnessed such a strange tactic before. However, it was without a doubt that Ling Han was truly powerful. Shrouded by the power of regulations, Sun Feng and the others were so powerful that their opponents didn't dare to face them head-on. They could only duck and dodge, occasionally launching a few counterattacks in reply, showing that they were already trying their best. Whoosh! Figures flew, and everyone could hear the furious bellows of Sun Feng and the others that were oozing with humiliation. However, this couldn't change their situation at all. Meanwhile, their opponents weren't faring much better. They were like fleeing ducks, ducking and weaving as they dashed around. The serious battle was reduced to a complete farce. Enough with the arrogance, a Monarch star from the enemy team roared. He was an 11th Leaf elite. He lunged over, causing the surrounding space to ripple as he did so. He threw a domineering punch. Ling Han replied with his fists of fury, instantly gaining a comprehensive upper hand. In just 100 exchanges, the Monarch star had no option but to admit defeat. Everyone was stunned by this sight. This was a Monarch star, one who had reached the peak level of the 8th Lotus, yet Ling Han had defeated him in just 100 exchanges? Just what kind of crushing might was this? The strength of this person could most likely already rival that of the likes of Chuan Tian, Qinghua, and Mo. No, you people are overestimating Chuan Tian and the others, someone immediately said with a shake of their head. Chuan Tian and the others were indeed in the top 10 on the elite leaderboard, but this was because most of the Monarch stars hadn't reached the 11th leaf in the previous tournament. There was a gap in cultivation level, and it was because of this that they were so dominant. That's right, another person said with a nod. This time, their cultivation levels are all at the 11th leaf, so only now is it a fair battle. To defeat a fellow Monarch star with such ease and composure. I'm afraid that this person is on the same level as Huai Jian. Upon hearing the name Huai Jian, everyone instantly fell silent. This was a legendary prodigy who was destined to reach lofty heights. To say nothing of surpassing him, it was impossible to find someone who could even rival him. Could Ling Han compare to Huai Jian? Most people shook their heads in doubt. Huai Jian had already transcended the level of Monarch star. He was peerless, and no one could hope to possibly match him. In any case, it wasn't long before the 9 Light Academy admitted defeat, ending the one-sided battle. Ling Han was naturally scolded by Qi Shuang and Yuan. He could have clearly achieved victory in a proper and glorious manner, so why had he insisted on employing such unsightly tactics? Of course, they naturally didn't dare to scold him too harshly. Firstly, they still had to rely on Ling Han to unleash his might. Secondly, Ling Han's battle prowess was already equivalent to the 9th Lotus, rendering him on the same level as them. However, in the following battle, Ling Han didn't join the fight at all. Instead, he decided to directly surrender, ending the battle between the victors. This angered Qi Shuang and Yuan to death. However, they still had to treat Ling Han nicely in the hopes that he would try his best in the next battle. As long as they won this battle, the 100 Battles Academy was almost guaranteed to rank around 50th. However, Ling Han didn't bother to show up at all, using the excuse that he had internal injuries which required rest. Qi Shuang and Yuan naturally knew that Ling Han was purposefully making up an excuse. He was as lively as could be. Which part of him appeared injured? It was clear that he didn't want to fight for the academy. Instead, he had his eyes set on the individual tournament for the elite leaderboard. When Ling Han left the tournament grounds, Qi Shuang and Yuan both walked up with dark expressions, scolding him in fury and frustration. Ling Han merely shrugged, saying, "Wasn't it the two of you who said to guarantee a top 200 finish and fight for a top 100 finish? I've already accomplished this mission, so why are you still unsatisfied?" Chapter 23:37 Who's the strongest monarch star? Qi Shuang and Yuan were about to explode in rage. They had only set the goal of guaranteeing the top 200 and fighting for the top 100 out of exasperation. This was because of Yuan's death. Otherwise, if they had a choice, would they not want their team to break into the top 50 or even higher? Now, with Ling Han's impressive showing, it was clear that he could have brought the 100 Battles Academy into the top 10. However, he immediately gave up after winning just a single battle. How could they not be enraged? If he had been incompetent, then he should have acted incompetently the entire time. However, he had clearly given them a glimmer of hope, yet he had immediately bonked them on the head with a huge club. This truly left them feeling dazed and sorry. The two of them continued to ramble, yet Ling Han directly entered his room, not sparing them any attention. The 1000 Academy tournament continued. Each day, more and more academies would be eliminated. At the same time, there were also academies that continued to charge forward, soaring toward a higher rank. During this process, several prodigies also rose above all others. Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Shui Gu. No one could have imagined that the challengers to Huai Jian's throne of dominance weren't the top 10 elites from the previous tournament. Instead, they were new elites who had suddenly risen during this tournament. In the end, the teams led by Huai Jian, Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Shui Gu successfully charged into the top 4. If all goes smoothly, the Eternal Dragon Academy should emerge victorious again, everyone said in speculation. The first battle was the Eternal Dragon Academy versus the 3 Manifest Academy. Ling Han especially headed over to spectate this battle. Up until now, he still hadn't seen Huai Jian's true appearance. He had only heard others talking about his handsome and elegant nature, as well as how prodigious and blessed by the heavens he was. In other words, this was a man who was covered in countless halos of glory. The competition began, and the two teams entered the arena. Everyone's gazes were instantly drawn to two people. As for the others, such ordinary people naturally couldn't attract any attention. Huai Jian. Su Xing. Ling Han had already seen Su Xing before. Thus, he focused his attention on Huai Jian. He was a tall and slender man from the angel race. Just like all other angels, he was as handsome as could be, and he more so possessed an aura of astonishing charisma. Standing there, he was like the center of heaven and earth. People could only gaze up at him. Surpassing him was nothing more than an impossible dream. Wah. His expression was modest, and he even wore an amiable smile. However, there was still an air of authority about him. He was like the sun in the sky, wherein others could only serve as his foil. Before his brilliance, they would lose all of their luster. However, Su Xing was truly extraordinary as well. Standing opposite Huai Jian, he was radiating with the wild aura of a ferocious and bloodthirsty beast. No one could bring him to submission. Su Xing is truly very powerful. Indeed, he can rival Huai Jian's aura. It's almost impossible to find another person like him. Even if he's weaker, the gap between them won't be too large. Everyone spoke with emotion. They were overjoyed. The stronger the younger generation, the more prosperous the future of their realm. The two teams were already engaged in a ferocious battle, with the soldiers fighting against the soldiers and the generals fighting against the generals. No one ran over to interfere with the battle between Huai Jian and Su Xing. In any case, they didn't have the right to. Su Xing stood opposite Huai Jian, and neither of them moved to attack the other. However, their gazes were as intense as blades as they looked at each other, and the aura surrounding them was so terrifying that no one dared to near them. If they approached, they would be ruthlessly crushed to smithereens. Whoosh! Su Xing moved first, dashing forward as he threw an explosive punch. He was truly powerful beyond belief. His punch transformed into 9 black holes that were capable of engulfing all matter. Huai Jian moved his hands, forming a ring that materialized the cycle of life and death. 6 Samsara realms, he roared. The ring continued to expand, and it was as if the entire heaven and earth were subject to the control of this ring. Meanwhile, Huai Jian stood in the center of the ring, proud and mighty like the ruler of the world. Boom! The 9 black holes collided with the 6 Samsara realms. Violent explosions tore through the void, causing devastating bursts of energy to surge into the surroundings. Symbols were also shredded, transforming into a sea of energy. The shock waves subsided, and everyone was shocked by what they saw. This was because neither Su Xing nor Huai Jian had suffered a disadvantage during this exchange. This was simply astounding. Su Xing could genuinely rival Huai Jian. To be regarded as the #1 monarch star. Sure enough, you're quite extraordinary, Su Xing said. His eyes were gleaming, and he continued, however, your glory and achievements will be nothing more than passing clouds and mists. I, Su Xing, am the strongest monarch star. No one can equal me. Huai Jian simply replied with a faint smile. It was as if Su Xing was nothing more than a disobedient brat in his eyes. There was no need to waste his breath on him. *SS off from the throne. Su Xing roared. He instantly launched another attack, his movements as quick as lightning. Huai Jian responded with calm and composure, with his 2 hands forming yin and yang as he materialized life and death. Only when one's comprehension of regulations reached a supreme level could they channel such power. Regulations would also experience life and death, so it was to follow that regulations weren't the most supreme power in the world. They were simply one form of embodiment of heaven and earth's magnificent power. Boom! 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 The 2 powerful monarch stars exchanged blows, with each exchange stunning the spectators. Even the monarch stars at the 11th leaf of the 8th lotus were dazed and astonished by what they witnessed. Their cultivation level was clearly the same, and they were also mighty monarch stars, so why was the gulf between them so great? Meanwhile, Ling was also relishing this spectacle. This was indeed a battle between the strongest monarch stars. He was greatly inspired, and he even felt a strong urge to leap onto the arena himself. He wanted to battle to his heart's content. Who's going to win? This was the thought in everyone's mind. Nsui. In the beginning, the answer should have been obvious. Huai Jian was supreme among all monarch stars, with his position firm and indomitable. To even near his lofty height was but an impossible dream for all other prodigies. This was to say nothing of surpassing him. However, upon witnessing Su Xing's ferocity, their minds started to waver. Perhaps Su Xing could truly bring with him a new age. An age where he stood invincible. However, this battle was forcefully brought to a halt. This was because the remaining members from the 3 Manifest Academy apart from Su Xing had all been defeated. They were unable to fight anymore. Moreover, the battle had already dragged on for 1 day and 1 night. According to the rules, when a battle exceeded 1 day, the team with the most remaining members would be awarded victory. Thus, it was without a doubt that the Eternal Dragon Academy had won. Everyone felt sympathetic toward the 3 Manifest Academy. They more so felt sympathy for Su Xing. Su Xing couldn't be blamed for this defeat. Instead, it was his teammates who had let him down. However, the Academy rankings were only to win glory for the academies. It was the person who topped the elite leaderboard who would win the greatest individual glory. Su Xing still had a chance. The following battle was between the Purple Flutter Academy and the Eastern Progressive Academy. At the same time, it was a battle between Jing Zhongyue and Shuaigu. In the end, the result was identical to the previous battle. After battling for 1 day and 1 night, it was impossible to determine the victor between Jing Zhongyue and Shuaigu. However, because the Purple Flutter Academy was more powerful overall, they achieved victory thanks to having more remaining members. They advanced to the finals. 3 days later, the final battle commenced. Huai Jian battled against Jing Zhongyue, with both angels unleashing their glorious strength. Neither was weaker than the other. The spectating elites couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They were witnessing the arrival of a prosperous golden age for cultivation. Huai Jian and Jing Zhongyue couldn't be separated, but the others naturally could. After battling for 1 day and 1 night, the Eternal Dragon Academy once again achieved victory thanks to the rules of the tournament. They were crowned victors once again. Afterward, it was time for the ranking battles for the elite leaderboard. Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Shui Gu had already risen above all others. Their renown was no lesser than Huai Jian's. They were all potential candidates to be crowned number 1 on the elite leaderboard. Who would reign supreme? Chapter 23-38 In-Depth Study. The ranking battles for the elite leaderboard commenced. The academies would first pick the strongest representative from each of the top 100 teams. For example, the chosen representatives from the Eternal Dragon Academy and the 3 Manifest Academy would be extremely obvious. They would definitely be Huai Jian and Su Xing. However, it was a more difficult decision for some academies since they didn't have any Monarch stars on their teams. Moreover, the strength of everyone was also similar. In such cases, they would hold an internal competition to choose the representative. With Qi Shuang's and Yuan's temper, they naturally didn't want Ling Han to represent the 100 Battles Academy. After all, he had purposefully slacked off before. However, it occurred to them that they would still need to rely on Ling Han for the next 1000 Academy tournament. Thus, they could only sign him up with dark and exasperated expressions. After confirming the 100 competitors, the next task was to divide them into groups. The ancestral king from the 4 Splendor Academy personally decided on the 16 seeded competitors. Moreover, it was guaranteed that these 16 competitors wouldn't meet before the fight for a spot in the quarterfinals. Because there were 100 people, it was inevitable that 28 groups would be relatively fortunate, having only 3 members. They would only need to eliminate a single person. Because of Ling Han's stunning performance in that one battle, he was also awarded a seeding. However, this was mocked by many people. Ants. As he was someone who showed no care for his academy's glory, it was without a doubt that his achievements would be limited. The gambling houses continued to list odds for the tournament. Huai Jian's odds surprisingly grew, by quite a significant amount too. It was now a 1-to-2 ratio for him to win. This was naturally due to the rise of Jing Zhongyue, Shui Gu, and the other Monarch stars. The gambling houses were of the belief that Huai Jian's dominant position might be threatened. The odds for Jing Zhongyue, Shui Gu, and the others were also fairly short, coming in at 1-to-2. 1 or 2. 2 and so on. They were clearly favored by many. In comparison, Ling Han's odds were much longer, sitting at 1-to-4. Ling Han resolutely placed a bet for himself. He was confident in himself, and he was certain that he could win even with opponents such as Huai Jian and Jing Zhongyue. Another 7 days passed, the first round of competition for the elite leaderboard finally began. Ling Han wasn't very fortunate, and he wasn't placed in a group with only 3 people. In the first round, he more so faced a Monarch star at the 11th leaf. This was a member of the insect race. His body was blood red, and he had the form of a ladybug. His outstretched wings were covered with sanguine patterns, and just looking at them could cause one to fall into a dazed and uncontrolled trance. You surrendered in the team battles, so why don't you also surrender now? The insect said in an enticing voice. Even Monarch tears would be led astray by his words. His tribe specialized in confusing and poisoning people's minds. Ling Han grinned and said, "Because I want to pummel you." He charged forward, unleashing his fists of fury. The insect was astounded. Not only had he failed to entice Ling Han, but he had even failed to affect him at all. This was inconceivable. He hurriedly parried Ling Han's attacks. However, at the same cultivation, the gulf between an evolution index of 11 and an evolution index of 10 was far too great. It was much like the crushing gulf between Monarch tiers and Emperor tiers. Ling Han immediately gained the upper hand, needing only 80 or so exchanges to destroy a leg and wing of the insect. This was also because the insect was far too reliant on his mind games. As a result, his battle prowess was inferior to that of most other Monarch stars. Thus, because Ling Han was able to resist his temptation, he was able to defeat the insect in under 100 exchanges. Ling Han successfully advanced to the subgroup of victors. The other group battle had also concluded, with the victor being a person from the demon race. Neither of them rested, and they immediately began the battle between the victors. In the end, Ling Han easily achieved victory, progressing to the group of 64. The 3 remaining members of the group weren't without a chance either. They could still fight for the remaining position. Meanwhile, the 2 who came last would compete for the ranks from 65th to 100th. According to the rules, Ling Han could rest for 5 days. Afterward, he would compete to enter the group of 32. Ling Han didn't waste any time, waking the slumbering Wally. He started to ask him questions. Normally, Wally would remain in a state of sleep. In his words, this could reduce his energy consumption. During this time, he would only maintain his capacity to process some data. Ling Han didn't understand this. In any case, Wally was like a block of wood, and he seemed to be the same no matter what mode he was in. Ling Han was extremely interested in the knowledge of high-level dimensions. Knowledge was wealth, and knowledge was power. Thus, he was happy to gain more knowledge. Moreover, he knew that if he wanted to become the strongest, he would most likely need to grasp all of the formulas and models that Wally spoke about. After all, these pertained to the foundation of heaven and earth. Regulations were only the embodiment of heaven and earth's power. These were things that could be shattered and surpassed. Thus, arduously striving to grasp more regulations was actually a stray path. Of course, unless one reached a paramount level, they would have no right to interact with the power of heaven and earth. Even trying to search for it would be impossible. However, Ling Han was different. He possessed the origin magic cube, and he had once been the ruler of heaven and earth. Thus, he had the heaven-defying ability to interact with the power of heaven and earth. Most importantly, he was blessed with fortune. He had come across Wally, a being from the dark inverse realm who was the culmination of countless epochs of knowledge and material skills. Moreover, this was a being who had gone to higher-level dimensions to learn all knowledge. If it weren't for these factors, Ling Han would have still been feeling his way around in the dark. Even if he had been 100 times more intelligent and 10,000 times more talented, it would have still been useless. Wally was also extremely generous when it came to sharing his knowledge. If he had wanted to conceal something, he wouldn't have ever told Ling Han about it anyway. As Ling Han sat under the reincarnation tree, his mind was filled with the formulas and models that Wally had talked about. His mind felt heavy and sleepy. He was confident that he wasn't an idiot. However, faced with these theories and whatnot, it was as if he had indeed become an idiot. He couldn't make head nor tail of them. He first used thousands of years to grasp these formulas. He then summarized these formulas to simulate and verified the models. This allowed the models to become increasingly vivid and lively. They were no longer pictures on paper. Finally, he utilized the origin magic cube to channel and run these models. Right now, Wally had only given Ling Han one model. If Ling Han could successfully channel this model, he would gain the ability to extract void particle energy. This was one of the most fundamental energy types of the Genesis world. Even if he could only extract a tiny wisp, it would still be unbelievably powerful. However, Ling Han's cultivation level was still far too low. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible for him to extract void particle energy. Only by traveling to the core of the foreign realm or by mining ores in the core that contained void particle energy could he extract this void particle energy. Theoretically speaking, the core of a dimension should forever remain in a state of eruption. Thus, such ores definitely exist. However, unless one's vitality index exceeds 15,000, it will be impossible to detect the presence of these ores. They'll appear no different from ordinary stone, Wally said in a calm voice. His expression almost never changed. It had only fluctuated when he had seen that unopenable scroll. Ling Han pondered for a moment before asking, "Am I able to absorb the void particle energy from that scroll?" "Theoretically, yes," Wally replied with a nod. However, he immediately shook his head, and said, "However, the scroll is mine now, so I won't allow you to use it. That will damage my interest." His tone was calm and serious. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Wally was truly a practical being. In any case, Ling Han naturally wasn't trying to take advantage of Wally. After all, he still possessed another unopenable scroll. Making up an excuse, Ling Han started to cultivate in seclusion again. He retrieved the other unopenable scroll, attempting to extract the energy from within it. Chapter 2339 Heavenly Venerate Tribulation. Ling Han had clearly grasped the theoretical knowledge already, and he also possessed the right tools as well as a medium such as the Origin Magic Cube. However, Ling Han was still unable to extract any energy from the unopenable scroll. Nas. My cultivation level is too low, Ling Han said in his mind. Even though the power of regulations was reliant on heaven and earth, rendering their level of existence limited, they could also be regarded as the embodiment of heaven and earth. If one fully comprehended the regulations, they could naturally glimpse the foundation of heaven and earth with more ease. Thus, heavenly venerates all ascended as ninth heaven celestial kings. No one could ascend from the severing mundane tier to the heavenly venerable tier. Ling Han also understood that he couldn't chew off more than he could bite. Right now, he simply wanted to grasp a sliver of heaven and earth's fundamental power. He was confident that this was possible. Otherwise, the Dark Inverse Realm wouldn't have deployed Wally into the foreign realm, using him to mess with the core of this enemy realm. However, Wally had been attacked before he could even carry out this mission, so he had remained in a state of hibernation for a very long time. Ling Han would cultivate under the reincarnation tree at times, and he would also run over to attempt to absorb energy from the unopenable scroll at times. He was as busy as could be. On the 6th day, he decided to give things a rest. He needed to participate in the round of 32. However, by some fluke, and just as he was about to finish up, a formidable and paramount power suddenly entered his body. This was a profoundly ancient and primordial power. It was brimming with a primal and pure aura. Rumble. Thunder suddenly roared across heaven and earth. Dark clouds rolled over, dense and thick in layers. A paramount tribulation was forming. Not good. Someone's about to face a tribulation. Heavens. This is an ancestral king tribulation. It's not an ordinary ancestral king tribulation either. It's a supreme 18th Lotus tribulation. No, I feel like even 18th Lotus tribulations aren't this terrifying. I think it's a heavenly venerate tribulation. Everyone exclaimed in shock. There was a sea of thunderclouds overhead, with terrifying arcs of lightning transforming into giants that could break through the clouds at any time and deal a fatal strike. Ling Han was also stupefied. This was indeed a heavenly venerate tribulation. When a heavenly venerate appeared, heaven and earth would turn to target them. For example, when the Jiawu heavenly venerate and sealed emotion heavenly venerable appeared, they would definitely be accompanied by a deluge of terrifying thunder and lightning. Even ninth heaven celestial kings would be easily killed by such tribulation. This tribulation was targeting him. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. A cold chill gripped at his heart, and his premonition of danger was so intense that his entire brain hurt. But why was this? He hadn't ascended to the heavenly venerable tier. Hang on. He suddenly regained his senses. Hadn't a mysterious and profound power just entered his body? This is void particle energy. This was a magnificent type of energy that only heavenly venerates could wield. Now, however, he had succeeded in extracting some. Thus, heaven and earth treated him as a newly ascended heavenly Venerate. It was also because of this that it unleashed a tribulation to erase his existence. Indeed, the heaven and earth of the foreign realm were at a higher level. Heavenly Venerates wouldn't be targeted when they appeared. However, this didn't mean that heaven and earth wouldn't unleash a tribulation when someone advanced to the heavenly venerable tier. If Ling Han had genuinely become a heavenly Venerate, he could have naturally dealt with this situation. However, he had only extracted a sliver of void particle energy, so how could he possibly rival tens of thousands of lightning giants at the 9th heaven celestial king tier? He hurriedly eased his mind, dispersing the void particle energy that had entered his body. Rumble. Thunder continued to roar, and lightning continued to crackle. However, heavenly tribulation didn't descend. Everyone was shaking in fear. This was a heavenly Venerate tribulation. To say nothing of targeting them, even if they were just scraped by this tribulation, even 15th Lotus and 16th Lotus ancestral kings would suffer immensely. 18th Lotus ancestral kings wouldn't be able to block it either. Only heavenly Venerates could face such a tribulation. Thus, if this tribulation descended, no one here would make it out alive. One had to realize that the 1000 Academy tournament was still being held. It could be said that all of the prodigies at or above the 8th Lotus were in attendance. If they were all killed, the foundation of the foreign realm would genuinely be wounded for at least several epochs. Fortunately, the thunderclouds didn't become more violent. Instead, they slowly dispersed, ultimately vanishing altogether. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They felt like they had escaped from the jaws of death. Meanwhile, the ancestral king of the Four Splendor Academy immediately started to investigate the situation. Why had a heavenly Venerate tribulation suddenly appeared? Perhaps some heaven-defying treasure was about to appear? This was the most popular explanation. After all, no one believed that a pseudo-heavenly Venerate existed among them. They all started to scour the Four Splendor Academy. Wherever one looked, one could see people walking around with their hands clasped behind their back, acting as if they were enjoying the flowers. However, when no one was paying attention, they would start to furiously search the surroundings. It was amid this kind of atmosphere that the round of 32 was completed. However, it was as if this tournament had lost all of its appeal, with the number of spectators dropping by a whopping 5-fold. Ling Han could only poke his tongue out in secret. If they learned that he was the cause of this, just how severely would he be pummeled? Of course, even more people would covet his ability to trigger a heavenly Venerate tribulation. Hang on. How did I manage to extract the void particle energy? Ling Han massaged his head in thought. He had made so many failed attempts before, so how had he suddenly fluked into success? He was completely unable to recall the process. Fuck. How the hell did I succeed? He mulled over this for a long time, yet he couldn't recall anything at all. His eyes were bloodshot, and it was as if he were a mortal who hadn't slept for several days. In any case, this void particle energy is seriously terrifying. Apart from triggering a heavenly tribulation, channeling the void particle energy for just a brief moment had also reconstructed every single cell in his body, elevating their level. My physique is definitely more powerful than before. Moreover, my power has also risen significantly. However, this kind of power is completely different from the brute power I possessed before. Ling Han's power had advanced to the ascending origin tier long ago. However, his brute power had been useless in terms of increasing his lethality. It could only increase the speed and frequency of his attacks. Although this was indeed useful in battle, it was clearly less powerful than advancing his grasp of regulations to the ascending origin tier. The gulf between them was immense. After all, regulations were the true weapons of cultivators. Without a solid foundation of regulations, one would be analogous to a powerful brute using a thin sheet of paper to slap someone. So what if they were immensely powerful? Could their slaps hurt? Now, however, things were different. After absorbing the void particle energy, it was as if his power had been fitted with deadly weapons. He could unleash deadly attacks even without using the power of regulations. Could the power of heaven and earth not be freakish? Even though it was only a wisp. If I can continuously absorb void particle energy to elevate my physique, will I be able to elevate my physique to a paramount level? At that time, can my physique advance to the heavenly venerable tier, allowing me to ignore the heavenly venerate tribulation? Ling Han murmured. His heart thumped in excitement. Damn it. How in the world did I extract that wisp of energy? Ling Han continued to mull over this as he stepped onto the arena. He was thinking so hard that he wanted to bang his head against a wall. Meanwhile, standing opposite him, Sun Ping couldn't help but wear a dark expression. He conceded that Ling Han was indeed profoundly powerful. This was evident from his status as a seed. However, he didn't need to be so arrogant and haughty, did he? Sun Ping had clasped his hands in respect, yet Ling Han hadn't even returned the gesture. Not only that, but he was even furrowing his brows and scratching his cheeks. What was the meaning of this? Are you belittling me? In the past, it was Yu Yuan. Now, it was Ling Han. The 100 Battles Academy was taking things too far. You're taking things too far, he roared in rage. He charged forward, with his aura rising like smoke. He was going to fight for his honor. Pung! 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 Ling Han instinctively counterattacked, not drawing on any power of regulations. However, he was able to easily rival Sun Ping. Chapter 23 40 Powerful Physique. Upon witnessing this, everyone felt numb with shock. Was this not astounding? To rival an 11th leaf Monarch star without using the power of regulations? Was this a joke? Regulations were the foundation of one's battle prowess. Even if one were an 18th Lotus ancestral king, if they didn't wield regulations, their battle prowess would only be equivalent to that of 6th Lotus cultivators. This was one of the main reasons why the foreign realm still hadn't been able to conquer the celestial realm after so long. Every single elite had to face the issue of exhausting the power of regulations. If they couldn't achieve speedy victory, they would have no option but to retreat. Otherwise, they would be seeking death. Now, however, Ling Han was relying on his physical power alone to rival Sun Ping. If this could be promoted, the foreign realm would no longer have any worries when fighting the celestial realm. Not only could they venture deep into the celestial realm, but after conquering the latter, they could even gain an advantage when invading other realms. They could transform enemy grounds into home grounds. At this moment, everyone forgot Ling Han's past arrogance and rebellious behavior. He was a profound treasure. Only the ancestral king shook his head. He had already understood the situation. It was most likely Ling Han who had triggered the heavenly Venerate tribulation just then. This was because he had somehow grasped a wisp of power of heaven and earth, resulting in him being targeted by a tribulation. However, he clearly hadn't succeeded. In fact, it was impossible for him to succeed. After all, a measly 8th Lotus cultivator had no right to grasp the power of heaven and earth. In the view of this ancestral king, Ling Han had most likely ingested some kind of mystical matter of heaven and earth, accidentally absorbing some power of heaven and earth. This had then triggered the heavenly tribulation. Meanwhile, Ling Han was tempered by the power of heaven and earth, allowing him to gain a wisp of the might of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth was the foundation of all matter. It was naturally transcendent above regulations, so was it strange that it could rival the power of regulations? Of course, if Ling Han's physique hadn't already advanced to the ascending origin tier, the tempering of the void particle energy wouldn't have had such great effect. This was a miraculous event that couldn't be replicated. The longer Sun Ping fought, the more flustered he became. His opponent clearly wasn't using the power of regulations. However, he could easily block all of his attacks, and he wasn't falling into a disadvantage either. That being the case, just how terrifying would he be if he unleashed his true strength? This thought was not unique to him. Everyone else was thinking the same thing. For example, Huai Jian, Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Xue Gu all wore solemn expressions as they looked at Ling Han. This was especially the case with Jing Zhongyue. She had fought against Ling Han before, and neither of them had unleashed their most powerful attacks at that time. However, they had still been able to sense each other's power. It was because of this that they had eagerly anticipated a rematch during the ranking battles for the elite leaderboard. Now, however, she suddenly realized that Ling Han had only revealed a sliver of his power. This demon. Just what was his extreme? After exchanging a further 100 or so strikes, Ling Han shook his head, and finally came to his senses. He truly couldn't recall how he had achieved that. Perhaps he was better off teaching those formulas and models to Hu Niu and the others. At that time, they could rack their brains together. Moreover, once they succeeded, their battle prowess would soar in leaps and bounds. In fact, they might even forge a new and powerful path of cultivation, allowing one to avoid regulations and directly draw on the power of heaven and earth. As he mulled over this, he didn't forget to throw a punch. Pang! He struck Sen Ping square in the face. Sen Ping involuntarily stumbled back. Pa! After taking 2 steps, he couldn't help but collapse to the ground. It was as if his soul had been beaten from his body. He couldn't control his body at all. Victory to Ba, the judge loudly announced. Sen Ping was dispirited as he left the arena. He had lost to Yu Yuan in the previous tournament, and he had lost to Ling Han now. Perhaps the 100 Battles Academy was his nemesis. Moreover, Yu Yuan had only been slightly more powerful than him. With a bit of hard work, he could have still surpassed Yu Yuan. However, Ling Han's power was unfathomable and unreachable. Just like Huai Jian, he was lofty and paramount. Sen Ping could only gaze up in reverence. Ling Han fought another battle, and he naturally advanced to the top 32 with 2 victories to his name. He was allowed to rest for another 5 days. When he returned, he immediately called all of his wives and partners over, detailing his experience. They were all delighted by what they heard. Because of their aptitude, the cultivation speed of Lu Yutong, Li Sikan, and the others was extremely slow. Even after using ancestral king blood, their cultivation speed was only slightly quicker than that of Emperor Tears. However, if there were another avenue to increase their cultivation, perhaps they could even become heavenly venerates in the future. Thus, this was naturally terrific. News. Of course, only a single mysterious scroll remained. How long it could be used for was still an unknown matter. They started to comprehend the formulas and models day and night. However, Wally's formulas were complex and difficult to understand, so even the progress of monarch stars such as the Empress and Hu Niu was extremely slow. It was very likely that they wouldn't make any discoveries in the short term. Anyhow, the Empress and Hu Niu both had extremely clear goals. They would advance to the 11th secret before they focused their attention on investigating the void particle energy. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro was also intent on advancing to the Ascending Origin tier. She wanted to become the first Ascending Origin tier elite among them. Thus, her focus wasn't on investigating the void particle energy, either. Ling Han was extremely happy about the 3 women's persistence. Cultivators needed to have their own goals. Only then could they soar to greater heights. In the following 5 days, Ling Han was still unable to make any progress. Meanwhile, the ranking battles had already entered the round of 32. Just like before, the member of the group who won twice would advance, while the member who lost twice would be eliminated. With Ling Han's strength, he naturally won his 2 battles with ease, advancing to the round of 16. Of the 16 initial seeds, only 1 had failed to advance. This was because he had come across a powerful opponent in the round of 64. He had suffered severe wounds even though he had achieved victory. As such, 5 days hadn't been enough time for him to recover. During the round of 32, he had thus been eliminated by another powerful opponent. Starting from the round of 16, the competition format would become single elimination battles. Each person would only have a single chance. Ling Han's first opponent was Imo, the Monarch star ranking second in the previous tournament. He was a holy beast, a member of the wolf tribe, and was covered in long silver fur, with his tail in the shape of a powerful dragon. This tail was sturdy and ferocious, and as it whipped around, it could even shatter the surrounding space, creating a void. He had shot to fame long ago, and he had already topped the elite leaderboard before Huai Jian's arrival. Moreover, it was clear that he didn't intend to advance to the ascending origin tier. It was as if he wanted to remain at this cultivation level forever, becoming the person to top the elite leaderboard the most times in history. Of course, this was only the speculation of other people. In reality, he was only delaying his advance because he was unsatisfied with his foundation. He wanted to temper it even further. He stood straight before Ling Han, and it was as if he were a notched and ready arrow. "Bah, I finally have the opportunity to battle you," he said. His voice boomed like raging thunder. However, Ling Han couldn't help but find this to be a shame. This holy beast was definitely a nutritious delicacy, but how could he kill this wolf and draw him into the Black Tower under the watchful gazes of so many people? "Niu wants to eat meat." Niu shouted from the sidelines. She was giving Ling Han a reminder. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. He glanced at Mo's leg and said, "How about we make a deal? Can you sell me a leg? I promise I won't eat it. I'll only use it for research." Mo was instantly enraged. "You won't eat it? Your eyes are almost gleaming as you stare at me. Drool is almost dripping from your mouth. Whom are you trying to kid? You dare to belittle me? You're taking things too far." The wolf lashed out in rage, with an ancient symbol materializing on his forehead. An astonishing aura swept forth, as devastating as could be. According to rumors, Mo once received guidance from a heavenly Venerate. That's right. The symbol on his forehead was bestowed by that heavenly Venerate. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Receiving guidance from a heavenly Venerate. No wonder he was able to come second on the elite leaderboard. Anyone can win this battle. The spectators were all engaged in spirited discussions. Chapter 2341 Mastered. However, Ling Han felt completely indifferent. At the same cultivation level, Monarch stars were already unable to pique his interest. His strength had already exceeded the level of Monarch stars. He had advanced to a higher level. The foreign realm didn't have a name for this level. However, they did indeed have prodigies at this level. For example, Huai Jian, Jing Zhongyue, Su Xing, and Shui Gu. Casting his gaze across to the celestial realm, Ling Han reckoned that Ji Wuming could somewhat count as a prodigy at this level. However, judging from what he had seen, Ji Wuming was actually still a little bit off. After all, the level of heaven and earth was different. In any case, if the Empress and Hu Niu could grasp the void particle energy, no, they didn't need to grasp it. As long as they could extract void particle energy to temper themselves, they could definitely increase their battle prowess by a significant amount. They could reach an evolution index of 11. Ling Han casually threw a punch. Even though he didn't unleash his full power, he was still able to easily suppress Mo. In just a few dozen exchanges, he had already gained a comprehensive upper hand. He then obtained an easy victory, advancing to the quarterfinals. As for Mo, the prodigy who had placed second on the previous elite leaderboard, he could only place ninth at best this time. One day passed, and the top 8 cultivators were all locked in. The supreme monarch stars such as Huai Jian and the others were naturally among these 8 people. Right now, Ling Han, Huai Jian, Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Shui Gu were the fancies to take out the title of strongest. This was a grand level of competition that had never been seen before. Such a great number of supreme prodigies had actually risen together. However, in the next round, 2 supreme monarch stars would definitely come face to face. This also signified the elimination of a supreme monarch star. Who would it be? They completed another draw to decide the battles. In the end, it was Su Xing and Shui Gu who suffered the misfortune of having to battle against each other. One of them would be eliminated. Like before, they were allowed to rest for another 5 days. Everyone was filled with eager anticipation. They could finally witness a battle between two Supreme Monarch stars. Even though several Supreme Monarch stars had clashed before, they had done so in the team battles. Moreover, they had been subject to numerous restrictions. However, the individual ranking battles for the elite leaderboard were different. Firstly, there was no time restriction. Secondly, there was no technique restriction, and they were allowed to unleash any technique without worrying about killing others. There was an ancestral king watching over them, so he would prevent anyone from being killed. Ling Han researched and investigated until he became dazed and silly again. When the 6th day arrived, he was feeling completely muddle-headed and confused. However, it was also at this moment that he suddenly felt a vast and profound energy entering his body. Void particle energy. This time, he immediately came to his senses. Crack. Heaven and earth boomed in reply, with thunderclouds rapidly gathering overhead. Ling Han didn't stop immediately. Instead, he committed his current state to memory, and only then did he rapidly stop his actions. He allowed the void particle energy to circulate around his body several times, elevating his technique. Only then did he disperse this energy. Having lost its target, heavenly tribulation also started to slowly dissipate. Ling Han had been well prepared this time, and he had made sure to cultivate in seclusion outside the academy. Otherwise, no one would dare to stay in the Four Splendor Academy anymore. After all, the situation would be far too dangerous, with heavenly Venerate tribulations rolling over at any time. Who could endure this? He slowly returned to the academy. As he made his way over, he continued to replay the past few days in his mind. So that's how it is. He came to a sudden realization. Even though there were formulas and models to learn and apply when it came to extracting void particle energy, the true method was one that could only be understood and not spoken. If Ling Han hadn't become a ruler of heaven and earth before, he definitely couldn't have extracted void particle energy at this cultivation level. He couldn't have done so even with the help of that unopenable scroll. He had only failed so many times before because he hadn't been a genuine ruler of heaven and earth. At that time, he had only possessed the strength of a pseudo-heavenly Venerate. In other words, he had only just been powerful enough to interact with the power of heaven and earth. Elevating one's physical power is much easier than elevating one's grasp of regulations. As long as I raise my power to the pinnacle level of the ascending origin tier, my battle prowess will be equivalent to that of someone at the consummate level of the ascending origin tier, Ling Han murmured to himself. However, it was a pity that physical power was a set form of strength. A certain amount of power would always correspond to a certain level of battle prowess. This was unlike cultivation levels, where the battle prowess of Monarch stars different from their cultivation. So that's why Wally uses the vitality index and not cultivation level to measure a living being's strength. Neuron. As Ling Han murmured to himself, he had already arrived back at the academy. He prepared to take part in the quarterfinals. The first 3 battles didn't spring any surprises. Ling Han, Huai Jian, and Jing Zhongyue all successfully advanced. Meanwhile, the eagerly anticipated 4th battle was proceeding with vigor and ferocity. The 2 Supreme Monarch stars were both unleashing their astonishing battle prowess, producing a brilliant and enthralling battle. Neither of them held back. Their strength was almost identical, so the battle between them was naturally as intense as could be. They were unable to determine a victor no matter what. They continued to exhaust each other's stamina. Fortunately, such situations had occurred before, so the hosts were naturally able to resolve the situation. The solution was to activate a time acceleration mechanism. 1 day in the outside world would equal 3 years in time acceleration mechanism. Su Xing and Shui Gu were truly as evenly matched as could be. Only after battling for a whopping 17 years did they finally determine a victor. Moreover, this was only because they were prohibited from using weapons. As a member of the insect race, Xuegu gained a slim advantage as the hooks on his body were naturally powerful weapons. During ordinary times, these hooks wouldn't give him any advantage at all. However, in this kind of evenly matched battle, this extremely slim advantage was able to give him an edge that became increasingly magnified as time went on. Su Xing was naturally unresigned to defeat. He was skilled in many powerful techniques that could only be performed with weapons. Thus, the two of them had already arranged to battle again. In any case, Xuegu was the final member to advance to the semi-final. In the next round, Ling Han would face Jing Zhongyue, and Huai Jian would face Xuegu. They were again given 5 days to rest. Ling Han didn't waste a single second. He ventured into the wilderness, and started to extract the power of heaven and earth from the mysterious scroll. He continued to walk the fine line between life and death. If he messed up just a little bit, heavenly tribulation would descend without any shred of mercy. At that time, how could his frail body withstand it? Flee into the Black Tower? Indeed, Ninth Heaven celestial kings were unable to breach the Black Tower's defenses. However, the tribulation of heaven and earth would never disappear. As long as Ling Han dared to reappear, the tribulation of heaven and earth would continue to form and descend until he chose to face it head-on. However, that would naturally be an act of seeking death. Of course, there was still another option. Ling Han could leave the foreign realm. However, there was no path to return to the celestial realm, and he hadn't grasped the regulations of the dark inverse realm either. As such, he could only remain in the foreign realm. Ling Han was playing with fire, yet this allowed his battle prowess to rise steadily. His physical power had already reached the great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier. Add to that the tempering that his physique had received from heaven and earth, and he could unleash a battle prowess at the great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier even without drawing on the power of regulations. Moreover, this battle prowess wouldn't be affected by the dimension that he was in. Even if he went to the dark inverse realm or an even higher level dimension, he would still maintain a battle prowess at the great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, even though he wouldn't be able to wield the power of local regulations. No wonder heavenly venerates are so terrifying. They've already transcended regulations, so their battle prowess won't be weakened no matter where they go. The 5 days passed by in a flash. The semi-finals began, and the two battles were held in unison. Ling Han faced off against Jing Zhongyue. His opponent was graceful and ethereal in her beauty. She was like a celestial maiden who could only be appreciated from afar. One wouldn't dare to bear too near her. "I've been waiting for this day," Jing Zhongyue said. Her voice was crisp and pleasant to the ear. Listening to her was a great enjoyment. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Please go ahead. I won't hold back just because you're a woman." Jing Zhongyue was enraged upon hearing this. She was a supreme monarch star, so did she need others to hold back just because she was a woman? She was a peerless sword that could obliterate all matter. "Myriad form sword technique," she said with a humph. She made a pushing motion with her slender hands, unleashing countless silver swords. These swords violently swept toward Ling Han. "Say, girl, can't we fight properly?" Ling Han said with a smile. He resolutely charged forward, swinging his fists and shattering the silver swords. He was like a demon lord as he arrived before Jing Zhongyue. Chapter 23:42 Limit. In everyone's eyes, Ling Han was quite suspected of having taken liberties with Jing Zhongyue. It could not be helped. One was a dark guy from the demon race, while the other was a fair lady from the angel race. The two of them standing together would just be like a beauty and a beast. Now that Ling Han had teased her verbally, in the eyes of the masses, that looked to be taking liberties with her. Jing Zhongyue's delicate face turned cold, and she attacked continuously. One after another, her attacks turned into harsh sword chi. She was like a goddess of war, beautiful and dangerous, lovely yet heroic. Even the males of the demon race, insect race, and holy beasts could not turn their eyes from her, their expressions captivated. If the result of this battle was decided by the spectators, the victor would doubtlessly be Jing Zhongyue. Ling Han put his all into the battle. His evolution index had already reached 11, and there should be no further room for improvement under present conditions. However, if he battled with an elite like Jing Zhongyue, who knew, he might be able to break through his shackles, and set out on a stronger path of evolution. He used various kinds of regulations easily and freely, turning them into the forms of various weapons that sliced out at Jing Zhongyue or wrapped around his fists as he attacked Jing Zhongyue directly. His tough physique was already very useful at this point. He could ignore the majority of Jing Zhongyue's attacks, and this allowed him to spare even more energy to use on his own attacks. As a result, Jing Zhongyue's attacks became fewer. Instead, it was his attacks that became even more frantic. From the bigger picture, Ling Han had already taken the upper hand. Basically, it was only him that was on the offensive. However, both he and Jing Zhongyue knew that the battle was far from reaching the point when the victor would be decided. While Jing Zhongyue's rate of attacks had decreased, the force of her attacks had increased. She would either choose not to attack, or if she did, that would be the harshest of attacks, and even Ling Han did not dare to treat her attacks lightly. However, as the battle continued, Ling Han became more and more proficient. His cultivation level had increased very quickly, but he had been in too few battles. When he was faced with Monarch tiers, or even Monarch stars, this was no big issue, but Jing Zhongyue was too strong. His attacks only had to expose the slightest weakness, and the woman would be able to take the chance to parry, calmly evade, or launch a rain of counterattacks. This forced Ling Han to continuously improve so that the weaknesses he would expose became fewer and fewer, pushing closer and closer to perfection. The stronger he was, the greater Jing Zhongyue's predicament would naturally be. Her counters further decreased, and she finally revealed an expression of shock. If this continued, she would lose. Lose? In a battle of equals, she had never considered the possibility that she would be defeated. This was a word that practically had no relation to her at all, yet it had now appeared in her mind. She was defiant. She was already a supreme monarch star, so why was it that she was still no match for Ling Han? It had to be because she had not used her weapon. She concluded that the reason lay here. She had a 9th Lotus level precious tool, and it could sustain an explosion of battle prowess that surpassed her cultivation level from her. But now that she was using her fingers as replacement for her sword, how could her physique hold up to the blazing of such great power? Her fingers would definitely explode into bits first before she even launched the attack. The circumstances of her defeat became more and more apparent, and she had no intention to make her defeat too bad. She decisively extracted herself from the battle, and declared, "I have lost." Ling Han was dissatisfied. He felt that his battle prowess still had some room for improvement, and couldn't help but ask, "Why don't we have another spar at my place?" When Jing Zhongyue heard this, her delicate face immediately flushed, and after a soft rebuke as she said, "Scum," she left swiftly. Go to his place to have a spar. No matter how it sounded, these words were ambiguous. The spectators, especially Jing Zhongyue's admirers, were all outraged, wanting nothing more than to pummel this outrageously brazen guy into mush. He was too shameless, too despicable, and too direct. Ling Han was baffled. He clearly was very solemnly inviting her for another battle, not a date, so why were they reacting so strongly? Ba's victory. As the referee's words fell, Ling Han also left the battle stage. As for who exactly would emerge victorious between Huai Jian and Shuegu, Ling Han was completely unconcerned. In any case, no matter who won, they would not be able to stop him from attaining the pinnacle for the sake of the egg of the primordial battle beast. He took the time to continue tempering himself, but soon discovered that he had reached a bottleneck. His power had stopped at the pinnacle of great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, and he could not take another step further. From the look of things, his cultivation level had still affected the upper limit of his power. He could only come back again after he broke through. The battle between Huai Jian and Shuegu had just concluded, and ultimately, the rookie prodigy had not managed to put on a show of a splendid counterattack. Huai Jian was slightly superior, and obtained the victory in the battle. However, both had paid a very terrible price. That ancestral king of the Four Splendor Academy spoke up, and announced that the final battle would be delayed for a month. There had never been previous cases of this happening before, but that ancestral king said that it was so that the two great monarch stars could fight at their greatest brilliance, and the reason was very honorable. But everyone knew that Huai Jian was about to be taken as a disciple by a heavenly Venerate. The first prize of the elite leaderboard was specifically arranged for him, so it had to be guaranteed that he would become champion no matter what, or it would displease that heavenly Venerate. Who would dare to displease a heavenly venerable tier? Ling Han was not concerned. He, too, wanted to battle Huai Jian when the latter was in his strongest state so that he could accelerate the stabilization of his cultivation level. Only then would he be able to break through to the ascending origin tier as soon as possible. After advancing into the ascending origin tier, being tempered by the source power of heaven and earth, would he then be able to match celestial kings? It did not have to be the 8th heaven or 9th heaven, he would be satisfied with just matching 1st heaven. Ling Han thought that he was thinking about it very modestly, yet did not know that if his thoughts were known to others, they would definitely say that he was deluded. What kind of existence were celestial kings? They were on the same level as regulations, and even the strongest ascending origin tier monarch star could not possibly breach the gulf between ascending origin tier and celestial king tier. This was absolute, and there was no exception. Yet Ling Han did not think so. The power of heaven and earth was superior to the power of regulations. He did have a chance of possessing battle prowess that could match celestial king tier at the ascending origin tier. Let's just wait and see. He did not continue to cultivate, but rather began to concoct alchemical pills. He was just a sliver away from achieving the 9th refinement. He only had to advance into this level, and he would be able to become a 5-star alchemist, being able to first advance into the level of celestial king tier in a certain aspect. A dozen or so days later, good news was heard. Both Hu Niu and the Empress had broken through to the 11th secret, and possessed the strongest battle prowess of the immortal palace tier. However, bewitching Maiden Ro had still not managed to break through. Even if she had as much ancestral king blood and celestial pills at her disposal, how could this step called ascending origin tier be so easily taken? Origin power had to be converted into source power. What about source power? The source power of heaven and earth had drawn even closer to the level of regulations, which naturally was hard to attain. Another 7 days later, Huai Jian had already recovered from all his wounds, and returned to the pinnacle of his battle prowess. Hence, that ancestral king issued a command that the deciding battle was to begin. This naturally was extremely unjust, and was incredibly partial to Huai Jian. Why was it that the battle was to begin once he was ready? What if Ling Han was still breaking through to some extremely crucial stage? It could not be helped. There was a heavenly Venerate standing behind Huai Jian, so who could not be biased in his favor? Thus, the deciding battle began a few days ahead of time again after being delayed for over a dozen days. Ling Han came with Hu Niu and the other women. Qi Shuang, Yuan, and the others had long since been waiting there. This battle had powerful implications. If Ling Han could win, then even if the 100 Battles Academy did not get the first place in the rankings of academies, they could still be proud, and would be looked on highly by everyone. Qi Shuang and Yuan did not offer Ling Han any words of encouragement. They knew that he was fighting for himself here, and he would definitely strive to the best of his efforts. Ultimately, just who was the strongest monarch star between Ling Han and Huai Jian? Chapter 2343 Ling Han vs Huai Jian. The final battle was about to begin, Ling Han vs Huai Jian. The seats were filled with spectators. Not only had many great sects and powerful clans come, even supreme monarch stars like Shuegu and Jing Zhongyue were all present. They naturally hoped that the one who had defeated them could win. That way, they would know that they were just a slight sliver away from becoming the champion. This kind of mentality was actually very common. It was fine if I lost to you, but you couldn't lose to anyone else. That would make me seem too incapable. The ancestral king of the Four Splendor Academy had also come personally instead of just sending a thought which manifested into human form like before. He spoke a few words, encouraging everyone to work hard on their cultivation so that they could possibly become supreme monarch stars like Ling Han and Huai Jian. Though everyone knew that this was an impossible feat, they still applauded strongly. They had to give some face to an ancestral king, after all. Finally, the prize for the victor was also taken out, an egg about the size of a human head. It was placed on a bed of crimson satin. The whole egg was golden and covered with multiple veined patterns of purple. Upon closer look, these veined patterns were slightly moving, as if it was breathing. The egg of the primordial battle beast. Practically everyone turned their eyes to it. That was an existence that was fated to become an ancestral king. If they could obtain it, they would have a beast pet that was at the ancestral king tier by their side. Merely the level of flashiness was already off the charts, what more the awesomeness of having an ancestral king as their follower. Too bad, it was going to belong to either Huai Jian or Ling Han. It must be Huai Jian's, no questions asked. That's right. An ancestral king obtained it, but was still unable to have it recognize him as its master through blood. Instead, he set it out as a prize. It has all been decided behind closed doors that it would definitely be awarded to Huai Jian. Unless Ba also has a heavenly Venerate backing him up. If he knows what's good for him, he will choose to surrender readily. Everyone was discussing spiritedly, filled with envy. To say nothing of them, even Jing Zhongyue, Shuegu, and the others bore heated eyes. This kind of ancestral, king-tier precious treasure was something even they were incredibly tempted by. Begin, that ancestral king said. Huai Jian clasped his hands behind his back, his expression gentle as he said, I have seen you fight before. You are indeed very strong, but there is still a certain distance between you and me. This is not because your natural talent is inferior, but rather that you have advanced into 11th leaf too late, and have not reached a level of perfection in the way you use your own power. He paused. Just forfeit. When everyone heard this, they all bore impressed expressions of admiration. Huai Jian had always been cordial to others, but he was filled with inner pride. It was clear from just these words. He was filled with confidence, and was sure of his own victory. There was absolutely no way that Ling Han could be a match for him, but it was not that he was completely self-centered either. He pointed out why Ling Han was not a match for him, exhibiting fully his dominance as the top monarch star. Ling Han chuckled, and replied, I have always been best at finding my own weaknesses in battle to improve myself. It is rare that I would have such a good opportunity, so please offer your guidance, Brother Huai Jian. Huai Jian was still all smiles, but his expression now carried a sliver of coldness. He had the ambition of conquering the world, and wished to create an empire that had never been seen before by turning around and attacking the Xian and I realm after he became a heavenly Venerate. He wanted to build his own force, and those like Ling Han and Jing Zhongyue were all targets that he wished to recruit. Ling Han was his first target. Huai Jian was going to use his own domineering demeanor to make the former submit to his authority. And now, Ling Han's reaction displeased him greatly. That was fine. He could beat Ling Han's pride into submission. All right then, let's have a spar, Huai Jian said smilingly. The wings behind him flapped, and his whole body emanated a golden brilliance that was extremely dazzling. It was as if he had turned into a god of war in golden armor, and others could not help but want to kneel down at his feet in worship. This was regulations of light, which had the effect of entrancing the hearts and drumming up morale. If this kind of secret technique was used on one's own troops in battle, everyone would be energized, and kill their enemies with no concern for themselves. Here, Huai Jian naturally could not possibly be drumming up Ling Han's fighting spirit. Instead, he was just showing how strong he was. Where the light radiated, visibility in divine sense would all be restrained, and in fact one would even become blind. Ling Han similarly channeled the regulation of darkness, but he was not a true member of the demon race, so he did not have any special natural talent in the manipulation of regulation of darkness. Thus, he merely spread out the darkness in a small zone, forcing the light out in a range of about 30 meters. In comparison, Huai Jian had control of an entire 5 kilometers. It was like Ling Han was a helpless child that was in the shadow cast by a giant. Divine Sword of Light. Huai Jian exclaimed lightly. Shoo, 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 millions of divine swords shot out all at once, shooting from various angles, and blasting towards Ling Han together. It was clear that he had sensed that Ling Han's physique was extraordinarily tough, and as they were not allowed weapons in this kind of battle, he gave up the idea of a battle at close quarters. Instead, he launched a long-range attack. Ling Han shot out a punch. Peng, 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 the regulation of slaughter unfolded, surging out of the zone of darkness. A boundless killing intent struck, instantly shattering the attack of light into smithereens. If anyone was even touched, they would definitely be driven into madness. This killing intent was too terrifying. The divine sword of light immediately shattered completely, and the zone of light also shrunk, decreasing from a diameter of 5 kilometers to 5 kilometers, but it still had the absolute upper hand. Regulation of slaughter? Huai Jian was surprised. Members of angel race like him or the demon race were all born with fortune because they had an affinity with the regulation of darkness or light by nature, so when they cultivated, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Thus, it was basically that the regulation that every member of the angel race or demon race was the most skilled in was definitely the regulation of either darkness or light. Yet Ling Han's accomplishment in the regulation of darkness was actually inferior to his accomplishment in the regulation of slaughter. This guy was really too willful, wasn't he? It was not that you couldn't cultivate other regulations, but no matter what, you had to push the level of regulation of darkness to the limits of your present cultivation level first before you proceeded to study other regulations, right? Wasn't this just putting the cart before the horse? The results of unbridled greed. Huai Jian rebuked, and flicked out a finger. Instantly, light condensed, turning into a massive spear that was as long as 300 meters. The body of the spear was covered with seals of light. Go, he exclaimed lightly. The divine spear of light shot out, blasting towards Ling Han. In the zone of light, its speed was high to an extreme extent. In a flash, it had already drawn close to the zone enshrouded by the regulation of darkness, and only then did it slow down, but because this zone was really too small, the divine spear pierced through this barrier in an instant, and arrived inside the zone of darkness before further slowing down. The whole process took no more than a millionth of a microsecond, and the tip of the spear had already drawn close to Ling Han's face. In fact, it was even visible that even the skin on Ling Han's face was rippling because of the murderous aura borne by the spear's tip. It was at this moment that Ling Han moved, even faster than lightning. Pa! He immediately got hold of the spear's tip. Huai Jian was unworried, and exclaimed lightly, "Explode." The whole divine spear of light immediately exploded. Boom! The seals turned into an ocean, bearing incredibly terrifying destructive power. Everyone shook their head. The gap between Ling Han and Huai Jian was really too vast. In just 2 to 3 moves, the former was already out of the running. However, a strange scene appeared. An explosion actually occurred in the zone of light as well, and its scope was becoming larger and larger. Finally, the explosion in the zone of darkness had completely vanished, and Ling Han was seen standing proudly, completely unscathed. Regulations of space. Huai Jian's brow creased into a frown. Chapter 2344 Exchange of Blows. Just now, it seemed as if Ling Han had been dragged into the explosion caused by the divine spear, but in truth, he had diverted the power of the explosion into the zone of light through regulations of space so that the spear and the shield would cancel each other out. Huai Jian was stunned. How was it that Ling Han had a grasp of so many different regulations? For prodigies like them, their cultivation level would advance rapidly, and it was as simple as drinking water for them to overcome the so-called barrier between cultivation levels. Hence, what time would they have left to cultivate other regulations? Merely cultivating one kind of regulation was already enough, and the real key was advancing their cultivation level. Without an adequately high cultivation level, so what if you were an 8th Lotus Monarch star? Faced with a 9th Lotus 2nd leaf or 3rd leaf, you would still lose. Only after becoming an ancestral king, when you could not possibly advance swiftly no matter how prodigious you were, would you then proceed to cultivate other regulations. Firstly, because you could comprehend new regulations through analogy, and obtain inspiration for breakthroughs, and secondly, it was so you could increase your own strength. Someone like Ling Han was completely ignoring his proper duties. Ling Han cracked a grin. It is against etiquette not to respond in kind, so you should take a punch from me as well. He shot out a punch. Boom, space was compressed, folding down on itself as he launched his attack on Huai Jian. This punch was not just merely a counterattack, but also further pushed the zone under Ling Han's control another 0.5 kilometers forwards. Huai Jian humphed, his right hand making a pulling motion. Instantly, a boundless brilliance emerged, greeting the shattered space that was approaching him. Boom! This counter from Ling Han had been blocked. Just a slight exposure of the strength of the two great prodigies was world-shaking. Everyone was curious. At the beginning, Ling Han had definitely been at an absolute disadvantage in terms of height of regulations, yet now he was slowly countering, turning the advantage and disadvantage ratio between the two of them into 8-2. Though he was still at a disadvantage, he had already recouped who knew how much from the previously completely one-sided situation. More importantly, who knew if Ling Han had other regulations that he had yet to channel. Huai Jian's arms shook, and divine swords of light instantly extended from his fists. They were completely manifested from regulations. No one would dare to use any kind of precious tool here. He charged out, bringing with him endless light, and launching a powerful assault on Ling Han. After a few instances of testing the waters, he realized that merely depending on long-range attacks could not possibly allow him to defeat Ling Han. That would give Ling Han enough time to react. Only a battle at close quarters would pose a real threat to Ling Han. Ling Han released a battle cry, using fists of fury to greet the oncoming attack. The two great prodigies clashed, one enshrouded in light like he was a god of war, while the other was enshrouded in the three regulations of slaughter, space, and darkness, as if he was a great demon king planning to wreak havoc on the world. The more regulations one had grasped, the stronger their battle prowess would indeed be, but it was definitely not just simple addition, but rather was far from this number. For example, if the might of the regulation of slaughter was 1, and the might of the regulations of space was also 1, then with the simultaneous channeling of two regulations, the might that could be unleashed would only be 1, 2 or 1, 3. This was also why everyone would concentrate on one specific type of regulations, because they would indeed be biting off more than they could chew otherwise. Huai Jian had focused on the regulation of light, cultivating this regulation to an astonishing height. His whole body was covered in interwoven light, possessing terrifying battle prowess, and completely beating down on Ling Han. Even with the compound effect of 3 regulations added together, Ling Han was still not a match from him. Ling Han did not panic. Was this his limit? Of course not. He channeled another kind of regulation. Endless lightning stretched out, and his battle prowess further increased. Correspondingly, the zone of light was further compressed by about another 0.5 kilometers. Now, it was a ratio of 7-3. Everyone was exclaiming continuously in shock. Ling Han had indeed grasped other regulations. 3 types of regulations was actually not his limit. For should be about it, right? No matter how many different types of regulations you have grasped, in front of me, everything is pointless. Huai Jian declared proudly. His hands pressed down on empty air, and boom, a divine sword of light instantly appeared in the skies, crashing down heavily on Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, and the 5th type of regulation was unleashed by him. This time, it was the regulations of metal, exuding an eerie air of sharpness on his fists. Pung! Ling Han's punch shot out, and the divine sword of light instantly exploded into bits. Golden light spread out, and the zone of light was shrunk further, reduced to 3 kilometers in diameter. It was close to an even match now. Everyone was already rendered speechless. Just how many regulations had Ling Han grasped? Huai Jian was also speechless. What he had said were words merely spoken in a moment of anger. Who would have expected that Ling Han really had grasped even more regulations, which made him feel troubled. With every additional regulation that Ling Han used, he would become stronger in terms of regulations, but there was actually not much boost to his battle prowess. However, Huai Jian had to guard against the scenario that Ling Han really had grasped all kinds of regulations. That quantitative change would form a qualitative change, which would be enough to match Huai Jian. Ling Han used Fists of Fury, and began a powerful counterattack. When he used the regulations of wood, the zone of light only occupied half the territory. At least from the bigger picture, Ling Han was no longer at a disadvantage. And when more regulations were channeled, it was the zone of light that was now being suppressed. Finally, it was only left with a diameter of around 30 meters, just like how Ling Han had once been. This was really a turnaround. Everyone was speechless. Who would actually believe this scene? Though the battle had not yet been decided, merely in terms of situation, Ling Han had already gotten an absolute advantage. Of course, Huai Jian definitely could not be considered as having lost. Just like how Ling Han had been at a disadvantage in the circumstances previously, yet was still unafraid of Huai Jian, it was the same now. Huai Jian was extremely stunned. Ling Han had actually grasped the 5 elements: lightning, slaughter, darkness, and space, a total of 9 types of regulations. How could he have so much energy? This thought merely flashed past in his mind. He immediately burst out with his full power, charging out to attack Ling Han. The 2 great prodigies exchanged blows, with ultimate moves used in quick succession. They were both showing their own brilliance. Ling Han still had an ultimate move he had not used, such as the regulations of time. This could win him the battle and turn the tables around, and he was sure that it was the same for Huai Jian. This man was a prodigy that would be rare to come by even in an epoch, and had even gained the favor of a great many ancestral kings, who thought that he had a great chance of becoming a heavenly Venerate. To say that this kind of character did not have any powerful trump cards, who would actually believe that? A sword descends from the heavens, destroying the spirit and severing the soul. As expected, Huai Jian soon used an ultimate move. A sword light streaked past, shaking the 9 heavens. This was a frighteningly powerful move. The sword struck out, and the regulation of light took solid form, appearing in the skies. It actually formed the shape of a seal, boosting the might of that sword light, and rapidly slashing out towards Ling Han. The 3 supreme monarch stars, Jing Zhongyue, Su Xing, and Su Xing, couldn't help but look stunned. If it were them that would be taking on this strike head-on, they would probably have to pay a very great price. Huai Jian was actually this strong. However, Huai Jian looked dissatisfied because this sword strike had been executed with his bare hands, and not that sword that he had been born with. Otherwise, the might could be further doubled. It was finally here. The fighting spirit in Ling Han's heart was already blazing like fire. He tapped out a finger, and everything stopped. Regulations of time. Huai Jian's expression changed drastically. Whatever the realm, the regulations of time were the most important, the most basic regulations. Without the regulations of time, this realm would be completely out of order, so how could any cultivation elites possibly emerge from this realm? Peng, peng, peng. Ling Han continued with a few more punches. The sword light instantly crumbled. The pillar that had been formed by the regulation of light also shattered, and the seal in the skies fell down subsequently, having lost its support. Chapter 23:45 A Narrow Victory. Huai Jian's expression was grim. Even against a prodigy like Shuegu, he was still filled with confidence, and thought that he would definitely win, but now a bewilderment he had never experienced before rose up in him. He could no longer be certain. This kind of hesitation made him feel anxious. He, the top Monarch star, was actually capable of feeling anxiety? But quickly afterwards, a strong fighting spirit rose up in his heart, surging out of the top of his head like flames, and soaring into the skies. This kind of battle was what he aspired for. Otherwise, if the result was clear from the get-go, the battle would only be a mere formality, and even his blood would be cooling down, which also caused him to behave gentle and refined, as if there was nothing in this world that could anger him. But very, very long ago, he had not been like this. He had been filled with passion and fighting spirit, longing to challenge powerful opponents. Before surpassing his opponents, he would have buried himself in cultivation, and that amazing feeling at the instant of victory could not be described. This was what a real battle was. This was the path of cultivation that he had walked, his original aspirations yearning to become strong. Huai Jian laughed loudly, his aura majestic. It was like he had risen again from the ashes, his battle prowess actually increasing greatly. This was a change of his mental state, and caused him to be completely transformed. Actually, he had long since been able to advance into ninth lotus, but firstly, he wanted to represent the academy in this tournament, and secondly, he kept feeling that his condition had not reached perfection yet. Now that his mental state tensed and relaxed, he knew where the last sliver of his inadequacy lay. Once he fixed it, his battle prowess naturally reached consummate level. This kind of Huai Jian was too frightening. Every move he made could launch sword chi, and even as his eyes blinked, a pair of precious swords would leap out, slicing into the heaven and earth. Ling was stunned. He had not thought that such an astonishing change would occur in Huai Jian, but after his moment of surprise, he was only filled with fighting spirit. This kind of opponent was too rare. With a battle cry, Ling unleashed his full battle prowess, using various regulations with proficiency, and showing their amazing might to the maximum extent. This was not piling regulations on top of one another. When an attack approached, he would meet it with the regulation of earth that inclined towards defense, and when he attacked, regulations of slaughter and regulations of metal would move simultaneously. In terms of movement technique, the regulations of space naturally were unique and unmatched. In the use of regulations, Ling was already close to perfection. And under the pressure posed by a powerful enemy like Huai Jian, Ling was presently speeding towards perfection. Those watching outside were all amazed and entranced, and felt an impulse to grab their heads and exclaim in shock. Whether it was Huai Jian or Ling this kind of prodigy should be unique and unrivaled, yet now two such prodigies had actually appeared. Would it be a relation of mutual hatred and friendship, and only one of the two could advance into heavenly venerable tier, or would they encourage each other, and both of them would eventually become heavenly venerates? The two people in the arena had already forgotten everything else, and were merely pouring all their efforts into battle. At this time, honor, prizes, and even victory had already been completely erased from their minds. There was only one word left in their minds: battle. Fight until they were completely exhausted, fight until even their bones shattered. The two great prodigies were showing their full brilliance, exuding the glory that belonged to them, and others were also paling in comparison. Only Shuegu and the other supreme monarch stars were still filled with fighting spirit, swearing that they would surpass the two of them. The others were all mediocre in comparison, and even monarch stars would feel a kind of helplessness. We fight, 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 and fight until the final bit of energy they had. Ling and Huai Jian were evenly matched. Even when time acceleration was started, 10 days had already passed outside, but they were still fighting intensely. This was a time acceleration of 1,000 times. 10 days outside were equivalent to more than 20 years inside. At first, the two great prodigies were fighting intensely, but now their speed was becoming lower and lower, with them only launching an attack after a long period of time. This was not because they were worn out, but rather that they had used all techniques at their disposal. Now, while they were fighting, they were pondering and scrambling their brains thinking of new moves to make. This was an even harder test of the two of them. If one's imagination, power of creation, and ability to react were slightly inferior, the battle would be decided in an instant. Now that they had battled to this point, the people outside were actually not so concerned about whether it would be Ling Han or Huai Jian winning anymore. The two had already proven their strength, and they were both undoubtedly the top two prodigies of the foreign realm, being capable of dazzling an era. Perhaps, the two of them would each go to a battlefield after a few tens of billions of years, leading various prodigies. One side would conquer the celestial realm, while the other would be in charge of standing against the dark inverse realm. After over 20 years of intense battling, the two great prodigies were covered with various wounds. Though they had both grasped recovery skills with astonishing effects, this kind of rate of recovery was far from catching up because the battle was really too intense. At this time, Ling Han's tough physique was a very great advantage. The injuries he suffered were slightly lighter, and so his rate of recovery was slightly faster. Though it was just only by a little, but as it accumulated, this became an advantage, and was also becoming a winning situation. By the 13th day, after Huai Jian clashed with Ling Han again, his figure finally swayed as he flopped onto the ground, unable to battle any further. His injuries were too severe. Killing intent rose up in Ling Han's heart. Huai Jian was too frightening. In the future, he really could possibly become a heavenly Venerate. To the celestial realm, this was definitely not good news. Ling Han had an impulse to directly kill him here and now, but firstly, he had developed an appreciation for the other party as another prodigy after battling for so long, and secondly, there was an ancestral king watching over, so there was no good chance to make a move. With this in mind, he slowly dismissed his killing intent. Bah, victory. The ancestral king spoke, his voice calm and without any sliver of fluctuation. It was practically an impossible feat to spy on the emotional changes of an ancestral king. The seal on the battlefield unlocked. Ling Han had not even walked out when he saw dense clouds spread out in the skies, with frightening lightning bolts flashing. Heavenly tribulation. He looked at Huai Jian in shock. This guy had broken through after this battle. He was really outrageously bold. This person's battle prowess actually was not inferior to his own, it was only his physique that was inferior, which ultimately resulted in a narrow loss. Of course, Ling Han had not used his stamina either, and it was on the pinnacle level of great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, which was a bit stronger than his power of regulation. Now, Huai Jian was covered with wounds, yet still dared to break through. How could it be anything but outrageously bold? But if he could survive even in such a state, that would be a great boost to Huai Jian's self-confidence, and could even be a rebirth of his mental state. As expected of Huai Jian, Ling Han shook his head, and walked out of the arena. The first thing on his agenda was to run straight for the primordial battle beast egg. Now, it belonged to him. Bah, I wish to battle you again. Jing Zhongyue walked elegantly over, a precious sword in her hand. It looked like crystal, exuding a chilling aura. When she had her sword in hand, that was when she was truly the strongest she could be. I, too, wish to battle you, Shui Gu declared in a grave voice. He had taken the form of a sturdy bald man, his skin blood red all over. His skin was extremely smooth, and it was guaranteed that there was not even a single pore to be found on it. Su Xing also stood at the sidelines, and did not say a word, but the fighting spirit blazing in his eyes said everything. Ling Han stowed the egg of the battle beast away, and then cast a guarded look at the three of them. You guys want to snatch my battle beast egg? Fuck. Jing Zhongyue and the others felt an urge to pummel Ling Han. How could they possibly do that? 3 days later, Sunset Mountains. Jing Zhongyue left these words behind, and departed. Now that Jing Zhongyue had snatched the lead, Su Xing and Shui Gu could only rub their noses, and did not set a date for a battle. It was still hard to determine who would be winning between Jing Zhongyue and Ling Han. Furthermore, even if Ling Han won, he could still be severely injured, and winning a battle against him at that time would only be unjust. The Ling Han they wanted to defeat was the Ling Han in his strongest state. Ling Han returned to the side of Hu Niu and the other women, and immediately saw the incredibly excited expressions on Qi Shuang's and Yuan's face. Sun Feng and the others, though, had dark expressions. They naturally had no wish to see Ling Han shine so brightly. Niu wants to eat an egg. Hu Niu set her eyes on Ling Han, already drooling. Chapter 2346 You can use weapons too. Hearing Hu Niu say this, both Qi Shuang and Yuan got a scare, and hurriedly stopped her, fearing that Ling Han would really grill the egg in a moment of impulse and eat it. That was something that was equivalent to an ancestral weapon and had its own consciousness once it was hatched, and would definitely become ancestral king-level existence in the future. How precious was it? Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Even without Qi Shuang and Yuan stopping him, he would not let Hu Niu eat the battle beast egg either. Be good, this egg is not delicious. After a few words of persuasion, Hu Niu finally dismissed the idea of eating the egg with much reluctance. They went back, and set out on their return journey after making some preparations. Meanwhile, Ling Han requested leave from Qi Shuang and Yuan, saying he wanted to travel the world. The two of them were very troubled by this. Ling Han had gotten first place in the elite leaderboard, and this was a great honor for the 100 Battles Academy. After they returned, there would definitely be a great celebration. The two of them were good leaders, so they would naturally feel proud as well, having gained a great honor, but if Ling Han did not return, the effects would be greatly subtracted. They tried to convince him repeatedly, but Ling Han had made his decision. In any case, his strength was clear to see. Even if Qi Shuang and Yuan used force, he could still calmly escape. Ling Han did not proceed to hatch the battle beast egg, but rather went into seclusion to meditate first, completely digesting the enlightenment he had attained in his battle with Huai Jian. 3 days later, he went to the Sunset Mountains as promised. Jing Zhongyue was already waiting there. One woman and her sword, a peerless talent unmatched. There were also many people standing around them. In fact, there were even some that had no space to stand, and could only remain afloat in midair. You're late. Seeing Ling Han stroll slowly over, Jing Zhongyue spoke in displeasure. I am too popular now, and had to greet too many people on my way here. If I had ignored them, it would not have been appropriate. I feared others would say that I was putting on airs now that I was famous, and that's why I am late, Ling Han explained smilingly. Jing Zhongyue's pretty face darkened. This guy really spoke nonsense easily. She had clearly seen that Ling Han had not greeted anyone on his way here. He was clearly just playing around with her. She humphed, waved her sword, and said, "This sword of mine is a 9th Lotus level precious tool. You can also use weapons too so others would not say that I am being a bully." Sure then. Ling Han nodded, and drew the divine demon's sword without reservations. With a slight wave of his hand, the sword immediately released a soft cry as if it was an invincible king that was issuing a warning. Suddenly, the crystalline precious sword in Jing Zhongyue's hand wriggled like a snake, as if it had encountered a terrifying monster, and was trembling in fear. Jing Zhongyue was stunned. This was her precious tool, and was mentally connected to her. Hence, she sensed that the sword in her hand was afraid, and the source of its fear was precisely the sword in Ling Han's hand. Fuck, it was already afraid when the battle had not even begun? Jing Zhongyue was both angered and stunned. She quickly waved the precious sword, planning to force it into battle. A crack actually appeared in the middle of the sword in her hands, which swiftly widened, and then the sword broke in half. Jing Zhongyue was rendered completely speechless. Her crystal sword had actually shattered itself just because of the fear it felt towards the sword in Ling Han's hand. It would rather break itself than dare to battle. Just what kind of subjugation was this? Ancestral weapon, she uttered with much difficulty. Only an ancestral weapon would be capable of subjugating a 9th Lotus precious tool. It was not qualified to even battle. Then what use was there to battle? Completely unarmed, she was absolutely no match for Ling Han. At first, she had planned to get a win with her superior precious weapon, but the result was even worse now. Before the battle had even begun, she had already lost. This guy was really too lucky, wasn't he? To actually possess an ancestral weapon. Ling Han waved the sword lightly, and asked smilingly, "Still want to battle?" Jing Zhongyue could say nothing. She turned around, and left with a flap of her wings. There was no way that she could match Ling Han unless she could obtain an ancestral weapon. With how valuable ancestral weapons were, to say nothing of obtaining, even if it was just lending, who would be willing to lend one to her? It would be better to wait until she became an ancestral king herself. Otherwise, she would be continuously suppressed by Ling Han's ancestral weapon, and there was no way that she would be able to make a comeback. The people gathered in the mountains were all speechless. Who would have imagined at the Battle of Titans that they had initially anticipated would actually end in this manner? Ling Han withdrew the divine demon sword, and left slowly. After returning to his quarters, Ling Han decided to first make the battle beast egg recognize him as master by dripping blood on it. Then, while it slowly hatched, he would continue to tour the foreign realm. When he had accumulated enough energy, he would then break through to the ascending origin tier. Within the Black Tower, his left hand held the battle beast egg, and he bit the index finger of his right hand. Instantly, blood dripped, and landed on the battle beast egg. While reciting in his mind, Ling Han dipped his finger in the blood, and began drawing on the egg. This was a seal that could help him connect to this beast egg, and form a slavery contract with the living creature inside. When the seal was completed, a frightening might suddenly surged towards Ling Han, as if an incredibly terrifying beast was opening its mouth, planning to rip into him. Ling Han discovered that he was in a dark space. There was no sky above him or any ground below him. It was only a complete vacuum, but very soon, a majestic, giant creature appeared in front of him. It had the form of a fierce beast, but it was standing with 2 feet on the ground. These 2 hind legs were long and strong, and took up about more than half of its size, but its 2 front paws were pitifully small, being curled up at its chest. However, its mouth was colossal, showing 2 rows of teeth that seemed like they were forged from blades, emanating an eerie glow. What kind of monster was this? Ling Han could only say that his knowledge of the creatures of the foreign realm was really too limited, but there was one thing he was sure of: this wild beast was no ordinary beast. Paw, 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 paw. The monster moved its feet, and charged rapidly towards Ling Han like a human. Opening its mouth, boom, it released a terrifying sound blast that swept out towards Ling Han. Instantly, enlightenment rose up in Ling Han's mind. He presently was only in spirit form, and the monster on the other side was the same as well. It came from that battle beast that had not hatched as of yet. As expected of an existence that was fated to become an ancestral king. It was extraordinarily fierce, it already had unprecedented, ferocious might before it had even been born. It was not willing to be enslaved by Ling Han. Thus, it began an intense battle with Ling Han in this spiritual world. If it could deal Ling Han a severe injury, it could then turn the situation around. Ling Han would be the slave, and it would be the master. This kind of slavery contract was two-sided in the first place, and the stronger one would be the one who made the rules. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. This battle beast was indeed destined to become an ancestral king, yet he was a man that would ultimately become a heavenly Venerate. He greeted the incoming attack without fear, his whole body blazing with boundless flames. On the subject of slaughter, whom had he ever feared? Pung! The man and beast clashed, undergoing a solid collision, and then both were bounced backwards. This was a clash on the spiritual level, which had nothing to do with physique. The battle beast was born for battle, and would go berserk in combat. Though it had not been born yet, its violent might soared to the heavens. Immediately, it raced back with rapid movement of its large paws. Its great mouth was open, biting out at Ling Han's neck. Ling Han's physique was shocking, and his spirit was not much inferior either. He, too, rushed back with a battle cry, his strikes pouring down like rain. Peng, 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 the man and beast battled fiercely. The battle beast was incredibly mighty and violent, biting randomly with its mouth. Though its paws were small, their destructive power was extremely astonishing. Even the slightest contact could cause a heavy injury on Ling Han. They were in spirit form, and there would not be any apparent injuries, yet they would become weak. Whoever was exhausted to the extreme would then expose the core of their spirit, and the seal of slavery would thus be easily planted. Ling Han naturally was not inferior either. With him using fists of fury continuously, the battle beast howled repeatedly, its form rapidly fading. Victory was in his grasp. Chapter 2347 The Battle Beast is Born. The intense battle continued for who knew how long. Finally, Ling Han got the complete upper hand, the beast wailing in pain continuously at his attacks. Its figure was also becoming fainter and fainter, revealing the core within. Ling Han grabbed it in a single stroke, and instantly felt the thought of defiance and unwillingness to submit emanating from this battle beast. Because it was an existence destined to become an ancestral king. Ling Han laughed loudly, and sent out a message through divine sense as well. Don't feel that you are unfortunate. In the past, there were 9 source powers of heaven and earth that followed me, and which of them were not existences that would be able to become ancestral kings once they gained intelligence. As for me, my finish line is definitely not just ancestral king, nor is it heavenly venerable tier, but rather becoming a true overlord of the universe. If you follow me, it will only set you off on a path towards greater strength. Instantly, that battle beast appeared hesitant. It had not hatched, so its intelligence was no more than a 3-year-old child's. If it were not for the support of its primitive instincts, it could not possibly have attacked Ling Han either. With Ling Han's persuasive words now, its resolve was naturally swayed. Ling Han did not rush it either, and merely waited patiently. After a while, the battle beast opened its core on its own volition, and let down its guard completely against Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a finger and pressed down, planting his own mark on the core of the battle beast's consciousness. Instantly, a certain special connection was formed between him and this battle beast. It was very hard to describe what kind of feeling this was. It was like his body had gained another limb that he could freely move, yet this limb had its own self-consciousness, and executed his commands completely once he issued them. No matter how unreasonable or dangerous this command was. How do I hatch you? Ling Han asked via divine sense. The regulations of the great Tao nurture me the best, so, Master, you only need to use your power of regulation to cultivate me, and I will be born very quickly. The stronger the regulations you supply are, and the wider the variety, the sooner my birth will be, the battle beast said. Ling Han gave an "Oh. I have to give you a name." If the Empress and the others were present, they would definitely try to stop him with their best efforts. This guy really had no standards in terms of coming up with names. It would be something like Little White, Little Black, Little Qing, or Little Gray. This battle beast was an existence that was destined to become an ancestral king. If some hideous name was given to it, it would definitely be teased to death in future. Too bad, this battle beast did not know that, and still very happily exclaimed, "Please bestow a name on me, Master." Though it had not hatched yet, it was already equipped with preliminary intelligence, but this time it had clearly gone blind. "I'll call you Little Terror, then," Ling Han said. "With how terrifying you look, this is not a bad name. In the future, you will be responsible for scaring people for me." It was a pity that this little beast did not understand at all, and was still cheering there happily, celebrating the fact that it now had a name. When it hatched, it would truly develop its own intelligence, and it would probably feel extremely depressed about its rash actions today at that time. "I'll go out first, and I will hatch you as soon as possible." Ling Han withdrew from the spiritual world, and then used the power of regulation to nurture this little guy with his arms around the beast egg. This time, it was not for the sake of battle. Ling Han extracted the power of regulation in a gentle manner, and it was all the regulations together at that, offering the best nurturing conditions for this battle beast. Master, you have actually grasped so many regulations, the little guy exclaimed in shock, communicating this to Ling Han through divine sense. Going by the look of things, I will be born in 3 years at most. Ling Han nodded, and activated the greatest eternity everlasting physique after he advanced to the 11th secret. His physique evolved from greatest eternity immortal physique into greatest eternity everlasting physique, which was much stronger than the former. He used time acceleration on himself, and the effects were not the least bit inferior to those of the time cultivation chambers outside. In fact, they were far superior because what he needed to accelerate was only himself. The burden was naturally countless times smaller, and the effects also increased madly. After cultivating this kind of physique, he actually would no longer need to use any time cultivation chamber. 3 years' time passed in the blink of an eye. A crack appeared on the egg shell with a crisp sound, and the crack widened quickly afterwards. The number of cracks also increased, endlessly spreading out. When the number of cracks had reached as many as over a dozen, a black paw suddenly stretched out of the crack, and ripped it apart. With that the egg shell broke apart like it had dried and aged. A small beast leaped out. It was completely black as ink, and only had a pair of ruby-like eyes. It looked exactly the same as the great monster that Ling Han had seen in the spiritual world. It was just countless times smaller. ADN was only a foot tall now. On the surface, it looked completely harmless, and instead seemed dumb and cute. The little beast saw Ling Han, and immediately approached, rubbing its head against Ling Han's calf. When it rubbed its head against him, Ling Han almost lost his footing and fell onto the ground. The little guy's brute power was extraordinarily shocking. Though it was also because Ling Han was taken off guard. How could he have been affected if there had not been enough power? Ling Han crouched down, and said to the little beast, "Little terror, you are very impressive." Ao. Ao. The little beast opened its mouth, and released what sounded like the howls of a wolf. Ling Han couldn't help but be dumbfounded. What part of this guy looked like a wolf that it actually let out such sounds? Could it be that its father had an inappropriate relationship with a female wolf, and thus such a little guy was born? If the little guy did not speak through divine sense, it would be no different than an infant that had just been born. Its calls were extremely childish, so cute that it would melt anyone's heart. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. He was such a mighty and dominant man. If he led such a little guy in public openly, would others look down on him? However, the brute force that the little guy displayed at birth was incredibly shocking. It was almost at the ascending origin tier already, so if it grew for a while longer, reaching the power of Celestial King tier would be just around the corner. But if it only had brute force, and did not have the support of corresponding regulations, it would still be useless. "Come, let me see your strength," Ling Han said, and tossed out a piece of pseudo-divine metal. It had been left behind after the divine demon sword had advanced to the level of a celestial tool. Little Terror stretched out its front paw, and swiped at this piece of pseudo-divine metal. An ear-piercing sound rang out, causing Ling Han to feel great discomfort in his ears. However, his eyes lit up because a groove about half an inch deep had immediately appeared on the pseudo-divine metal where the little guy's claws had swiped. This was astonishing. The little guy hadn't used much force at all, and merely swiped out casually at the pseudo-divine metal. Though this was only a 3-star pseudo-divine metal, it could still prove that the little beast did not just have strength, but also indeed had astonishing destructive power. Ling Han took out another piece of pseudo-divine metal. This time, it reached the height of 6 stars. The little beast swiped its claws again, and a piercing sound rang out. A fine line was left behind on the 6-star pseudo-divine metal, but it was not very obvious. This angered the little beast. Its ruby-like eyes shone with a violent light as it charged forwards and randomly bit the pseudo-divine metal. When it loosened its jaws, this pseudo-divine metal was already damaged and tattered. So powerful. Ling Han tried again, and discovered that the limit of destructive power for the little beast was 7 stars pseudo-divine metal. It could damage it, but would need to expend a lot of power, and faced with 8 stars pseudo-divine metal, it could do nothing at all. This was already extremely terrifying. It should be known that the little guy had just been hatched. If it matured even further, just what kind of astonishing destructive power would it have? Ling Han studied the little guy's claws closely. Upon the first look, they were just black scales and hard armor, but if he studied it closer, he discovered that they were covered with seals. Green or blue. Just like in Japanese, there's a word that means both those colors and another separate for green, but it's the former here. By the way, it's not uncommon to use such names as those 4 for pets in China. Chapter 2348, Very Shocking. Ling Han tested the little beast's defenses as well, and was stunned once more. The little guy's defense was also shockingly strong, capable of matching 7-star pseudo-divine metal, which was the same level as its destructive power. No wonder this little guy would be called a battle beast. It had a combination of frightening destructive power and defense, and was born specifically for the purpose of bloodshed and destruction. Ling Han couldn't help but think that there were war soldiers in the dark inverse realm, and the foreign realm had battle beasts. Was this a race that the foreign realm had given rise to for the sake of its own protection? After all, they were already at the ascending origin tier from birth. This was too shocking, and did not match the normal pattern of heaven and earth either. Powerful strength should be attained only through hard work, and not be something that one was born with, a harvest that was reaped without sowing. Hence, if battle beasts were born by the foreign realm for the sake of self-protection and to stand against the war soldiers, this would actually be a very logical deduction. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and planned to ask Wally some questions. Wah, what a cute puppy. When they saw Little Terror, all the women's eyes lit up, looking like they wanted to pounce at any moment. Ling Han couldn't help but sweat madly. These women really should not see any adorable things, especially when they could not give birth to their own babies. Because of that, they had even less immunity to cute things. Furthermore, did this look like a puppy? What was wrong with your eyes? It looks quite delicious. Hunyo stroked her chin as she set her eyes on the little beast, already about to drool. Only she was different from the rest. Sensing Hunyo's animosity, Little Terror immediately turned to look at her. It bared its mouth, revealing 2 rows of snow-white teeth. In adulthood, it was extremely ferocious with those 2 rows of teeth looking like blades, and would cause a chill to rise up in anyone's heart, but at present, it could not look ferocious at all. Instead, others would only think that it was extremely cute and adorable. It was just like when a little puppy that had just been born was showing its rage. Who would be afraid? Ling Han laughed involuntarily, and said, "Nyo, calm down. This little guy is very fierce." Hunyo was naturally unafraid, and snorted. "Just a little guy, Nyo doesn't think it can even fill my stomach." Ayo. Little Terror released a roar, and howled at Hunyo. But it was very childish, and did not seem at all threatening. The women couldn't help but laugh loudly, feeling that this little guy was really so fun to play around with. "Come, let big sister hug you." Bewitching Maiden Ro stretched out her hand. Little Terror was furious. It was no pet, but rather a battle beast, born purely for the sake of battle. Cuteness had absolutely nothing to do with it. Ayo, it released another howl, but it was not out of rage this time, but rather because Ling Han was scratching its neck with a finger, which made it feel great comfort. The little guy looked plaintively at Ling Han. "I am a mighty battle beast, not a pet." Ayo. It had not expected that the women would also rush forwards, and would rub it repeatedly, making the little guy so comfortable that its tail was stretched straight, and its gaze was even more adorable now. "I am a battle beast. Battle beast. Battle beast, you bastards." The little guy's tummy was exposed. It was completely unguarded, allowing the women to ravage it as they liked. Of course, this was also because it knew that these were all its mistresses, and did not dare to resist. Otherwise, if anyone else had dared to bully it like this, the little guy would have long since exploded. It obediently took on the role of pet for the women to play with. In any case, it would not be hurt with its tough hide. Ling Han went off to seek out Wally. What relation do battle beasts have with war soldiers? Ling Han asked directly. Wally searched his memories, and replied, battle beasts should be creatures that this realm has created to oppose the war soldiers of our realm. They possess the unique traits of high defense and high destructive power, and that is for the purpose of destroying the war soldiers of our realm. However, the heaven and earth could not possibly interfere too much, and added with the extreme difficulty of reproduction of battle beasts, they have long since disappeared, and can be considered a failed attempt of the heaven and earth. Ling Han was curious, and asked, then which of the two is stronger? If they were of the same level, it would naturally be the battle beast that was stronger, Wally immediately said. However, the number of battle beasts cannot compare to the number of war soldiers. A single war soldier may not be a match for the former, but they could attack in a group of 10, 20, or even 100 all at the same time. Ling Han nodded. Why had battle beasts gone extinct, and why could they now only be found in an ancient tomb? It was because this was an attempt that could not be emulated, and that was why they had been eliminated by the heaven and earth, the latter no longer willing to expend further energy on this aspect. However, though battle beasts had been eliminated, it did not mean that this kind of creature was not strong. It was just that their numbers were too low, and could not have extensive effects. You actually have a battle beast. Wally appeared slightly surprised. The expression of surprise was merely a slight widening of his mouth on his wooden face, but it was already a very impressive feat to actually manage to cause him to feel surprise. No need to admire me. I know I am very awesome, Ling Han said, smiling. Wally looked at Little Terror. Wang, his eyes lit up with a green light, and began to scan Little Terror up and down. Roar! Sensing this kind of green light, Little Terror immediately flipped over and stood up. It fixed its eyes on Wally, exploding with terrifying ferocious might. It did not know Wally, but the light that he emitted caused it to instinctively feel discomfort, or even fury. The moment this ferocious might was revealed, the women all got a scare, and only then did they know that this little guy actually had such a dominant side to it. For better or worse, it is still a battle beast, after all. Ling Han deliberately stepped back a little, and did not stop Little Terror from attacking. He was extremely curious about Wally's small world. The latter could absorb even one of the essence powers of a Genesis world, void particle energy. What kind of freak was this? Wally did not react, and continued scanning Little Terror. Little Terror was completely enraged now. Since Ling Han did not stop it, its bloodthirst as a battle beast immediately exploded. Ting, 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 it moved its two hind legs. It was very strong and powerful. Even though its feet were tiny, it had astonishing explosive power. Shio, it instantly rushed in front of Wally, and then stretched out its claws which swiped outwards. Wally stepped back, but his feet did not move. Instead, his whole person simply slid back like that, which was extremely bizarre. However, this kind of evasive method was extremely efficient. No matter how Little Terror attacked him, he would always manage to dodge in time. Ling Han's eyes lit up. What Wally was using should be regulations of space, but they were not regulations of space, which was extremely strange. This was the power of heaven and earth that was superior to regulations? Regulations were manifested from the power of heaven and earth, and actually belonged to the power of heaven and earth as well, but when cultivators battled, they would have to first draw on regulations, and convert them into attack power or speed. There was a process of conversion. No matter how fast this process was, it would still need time. Hence, Wally would have the chance to dodge. Of course, aside from Wally, others would also need to use regulations for evasion. This similarly had a process of conversion. In that case, there was no visible advantage. As Ling Han studied, he actually could also use a sliver of the power of heaven and earth, and that was thanks to his body that had been tempered by void particle energy. He could directly draw on his own power, and would not need to stimulate regulations first to convert them into either attack power or speed. Theoretically, though my power is only at the pinnacle of the ascending origin tier, my battle prowess should not be limited to that if I could fully make use of my advantage, he mused. As expected, having Little Terror battle Wally was a wise decision. Wally soon stopped the scanning green light. While calmly dodging Little Terror's attacks, he said to Ling Han, "This battle beast has very strong genes, and is worth nurturing." Though a battle beast would definitely become a celestial king, there were still 9 heavens in celestial king tier. Chapter 2349, Huai Jian's Invitation. In the area of analysis, Ling Han was only impressed with Wally. Since the latter said that Little Terror was worth nurturing, then it was definitely worth nurturing. Ling Han couldn't help but rub his chin. Could he find a female for this kind of powerful battle beast so that it could have a bunch of kids, and let him build a powerful troop of battle beasts? However, the little guy had just hatched. It was a little inappropriate to have such ideas about it now. Never mind, never mind. He'd wait and see when it was older. Little Terror seemed to have sensed Ling Han's gaze, and involuntarily shuddered. It looked towards Ling Han, its gaze plaintive. Ling Han laughed loudly. With a mere thought, the little guy immediately stopped obediently, and made no further move to attack. He picked the little guy up, and then took out a great number of alchemical pills and celestial medicines. "Come, little guy, eat some more, so you can grow up quickly." His eyes shone, already planning to use Little Terror like a stud. Hold on, was the little guy male or female? He couldn't help but turn his eyes to the spot between the legs of the little guy, causing the little guy to break out in an involuntary shudder as it clamped its legs together tightly. "Even if you are my master, you cannot peep on my private areas." This little guy can't have developed wariness, right? It would be reluctant even if I had it made in the future. "Little guy, that is a fun activity. What kind of mood are you having?" "True, it is still too young. It will change in future." Bah! Right at this moment, a voice rang out from outside. Ling Han heard it, and couldn't help but appear slightly surprised. A dashing, incredibly handsome young man of the angel race stood outside his door. He had a captivating demeanor as well, and others would feel the urge to worship him. Huai Jian. Ling Han nodded, and asked, "There weren't any residual effects, right?" The other had broken through to the 9th lotus in a state of severe injury. The slightest accident could cause a serious Dao injury, which would be a great problem. Huai Jian cracked a smile. "I do indeed have some injuries, but I see them as a kind of grinding stone. After I erase this Dao injury, my battle prowess will be further boosted." Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed, and he said, "You actually can completely expel your internal injuries, right?" Huai Jian was taken aback slightly, and only then replied, "You have guessed correctly. That is indeed the case." This guy was really mad that he would actually dare to deliberately leave an internal injury inside his body when he was breaking through just to temper himself. Ling Han pondered, even he would not dare to mess around like that. That was completely playing with fire. But it could not be denied that if Huai Jian had really destroyed that Dao injury with his own powerful determination and willpower, his battle prowess would indeed have been raised to a frightening height. True, he wanted to surpass Ling Han, so he would definitely have to use a method that was not normal. That was because they had already reached the normal limits, or even far surpassed them long ago. To further improve from the limits, they could only resort to extreme methods. There was actually not much difference between a prodigy and a maniac. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Have you sought me out for another fight?" His fighting spirit was very strong. Sparring with an elite like Huai Jian was greatly beneficial for him. Huai Jian shook his head. "I am already a 9th lotus, but you are only in the 8th lotus. If I exchanged blows with you, that would be an unjust victory. When you advance to the 9th lotus, we will battle again." "All right." Ling Han did not force the matter. Monarch stars were naturally proud, what more when it was Huai Jian. I have sought you out today just to ask if you have the interest to take Lord Desolate Eternity as master with me, Huai Jian said solemnly. Lord Desolate Eternity? Ling Han appeared slightly surprised. Who was this now? Huai Jian was also surprised, and asked, could it be that you don't know who Lord Desolate Eternity is? Ling Han scratched his head. I really don't. Huai Jian shook his head. Lord Desolate Eternity is a heavenly venerate. Oh, so this was a heavenly venerate of the foreign realm. Ling Han chuckled, and said, how could a heavenly venerate possibly take me as a disciple? Huai Jian shook his head, and said, you are being too modest here. Your aptitude has far surpassed that of a great majority of descendants of heavenly venerates. If you still couldn't gain the serious notice of a heavenly venerate, I would not be able to bring myself to introduce you either. A heavenly venerate did not have many descendants, but because his bloodline was too powerful, it was extremely easy for monarch stars to emerge from his bloodline, ones that could attain up to the height of 18th Lotus Ancestral King, but they could not even dream of being capable of going beyond the threshold of the Ancestral Kings. At the very least, there had never been a legend of two heavenly venerates emerging from the same line in the foreign realm. However, there was still difference in strength among monarch stars, just like in the promised battle between the foreign realm and celestial realm, when Ji Wuming was practically capable of matching Qi Shui. Furthermore, it was in a situation when the former was inferior by a minor level at that. Qi Shui was a monarch star, and was also a descendant of heavenly venerate Qi Yan, but even then, so what? In a battle of equals, Ji Wuming would definitely win. Ling Han's brain immediately became active. Should he agree? Actually, he very much wanted to come in contact with a heavenly venerate. Since he, too, wanted to step into this threshold, if he came in contact with it beforehand, it would be easier for him to have a clear glimpse of the path that lay ahead of him. But the problem here was this: with the insight of a heavenly venerate, would his heaven-deceiving technique be capable of deceiving him? Hold on, didn't he have Wally? Ling Han paused silently, and said, allow me to consider. Could I give you a reply tomorrow? Huai Jian was unbelievably stunned. He still had to consider this? Fuck, this was sending you to become the disciple of a heavenly venerate, not demanding that you go to the battlefield. How many monarch stars were there that wanted this opportunity but were not granted it, and you actually said that you wanted to consider? If it had to be anyone considering, it should be heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity. If it were not for the fact that Huai Jian admired Ling Han very much, and had a strong wish to defeat this opponent in the future, and thus did not wish that Ling Han was too weak, he would definitely have turned around and left by now. All right then, he agreed. When Huai Jian had left, Ling Han immediately called Wally over, and questioned him. You want to fool an existence that has a vitality index over 15,000? Wally's eyes lit up and dimmed, seeming to be going through the process of calculation and deduction. After a while, he said, no way, you cannot do it. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. It looked like his hope of getting in close contact with a heavenly venerate was going to be fruitless. However, if I help you do some modifications, you should be able to do so. Who would have expected Wally would come around with a major turn of events? Ling Han couldn't help but break in a cold sweat. Could it be that Wally had been influenced by him, and had now learned to joke around as well? Teach me, he said. Wally did not immediately teach him, but rather asked him to teach him the heaven-deceiving technique, which he would then modify further. Ling Han exerted time acceleration effects on him. Half a day later, Wally's eyes snapped open. It's done. He nodded, and his eyes shone. Teaching the modified heaven-deceiving technique through formulae and models, he said, this is also slightly helpful for me, allowing me to better conceal myself, so I will not collect payment from you. Right, this guy hadn't changed in the slightest. Ling Han looked at these formulae and models, and felt a headache coming on, but Wally would only display the cultivation technique in this format. In his eyes, the world was like this. It was a massive model, and this giant model could be further divided into countless formulae. Everything had a logic that could be traced. Ling Han ignored that first. Not only did he memorize these formulae and models, the women were no exception either. Primarily, it was the Empress, Hunyou, and bewitching Maiden Ro. For the other women, their cultivation levels were too low, so there was not much meaning for them to cultivate the heaven-deceiving technique, as they would not be able to fool many people. They had best just obediently stay inside the Black Tower. A day passed, and when Huai Jian came again, Ling Han nodded decisively. Sure, let's go together. Huai Jian couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He was not begging Ling Han here. Did you feel so very unfortunate to become a disciple of a heavenly Venerate? Chapter 2350, Divine Desolate Mountain. Because Ling Han said he would go with Huai Jian to heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, Yuan and Qi Shuang naturally had no further right to refuse him, and could only send Ling Han on his way with eyes filled with envy. But what made them even depressed was the fact that even the Empress, Hunyou, and bewitching Maiden Ro ran off with him. Two of them were Monarch stars, and would be able to gain further honor for 100 Battles Academy in future. Yet did they dare to contend with a heavenly Venerate over them? Ling Han and his group set out. Huai Jian naturally knew the way, and led their group. On their journey, they used transfer formations to cover the distance. Wally still took the form of an ornament hanging from the corner of Ling Han's robes. He had also used the heaven-deceiving technique, his skill of concealing himself having improved greatly. About 7 years passed, and they finally arrived at their destination. This was an incredibly majestic great mountain, so tall that one could only look up at it. There were clouds of various colors entwined around the mountain, exuding a boundless air of majesty and austerity, and making others only want to fall to their knees in worship. It was like there was a heavenly Venerate seated there. This was Divine Desolate Mountain, and also the place of enlightenment of that heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. Heavenly Venerates varied in their personalities. Some heavenly Venerates kept an incredibly low profile. It was not even impossible that no one knew that they existed. Some heavenly Venerates kept a very high profile, and their reputation spread far and wide, intimidating the rest of the world. Not only did this heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity keep a high profile, he was also very fond of accepting disciples. He had more than 30 disciples under his name, but it was like there was a curse. The heavenly Venerate could not give rise to another heavenly Venerate through his teachings. Every heavenly Venerate in history had walked the path of the strongest with their own power, and for those disciples of heavenly Venerates, their highest accomplishment would only be limited to 18th Lotus Ancestral King, though it was possible that they would be incredibly strong and very close to the height of pseudo-heavenly Venerable tier. Of course, prodigies would never admit defeat. Take Huai Jian, for example. His goal was definitely to become a heavenly Venerate, yet why would he then take the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity as a master? Because he was confident that he could break the curse. Actually, every single Monarch star had that kind of confidence, but there had ultimately been none that could break this curse. They only increased the weight of this curse further and further. Ling Han naturally did not believe it either. Otherwise, why would he have come? Only one thing was clear, and that was that attaining heavenly Venerable tier was really, really difficult. They ascended the mountain. Ling Han and his group had long since learned the newly modified heaven-deceiving technique. According to Wally, not even a heavenly Venerate could possibly see through it. Meanwhile, Little Terror had not grown at all in these years, still looking dumbly cute. However, its battle prowess had increased considerably. Now, it was mere child's play for it to chew through 7 stars pseudo-divine metal, and faced with 8 stars pseudo-divine metal, it could still manage to create a mark. The moment they entered the mountainous area, they had lost all sense of direction. They felt like they were surrounded by fog everywhere, and could not even see the fingers on their own hands. Not only was it sight, even their hearing and divine sense had been sealed altogether. Huai Jian took out a small pendant, but the moment he took it out, it expelled the fog, and they could now see in a limited range of at least 30 meters. This is the token bestowed by Lord Desolate Eternity, he explained to Ling Han and the others. Thai were just about to set out when they all stopped, and Little Terror, who was in bewitching Maiden Rose arms, bared its teeth, exposing its ferocious nature. I am Huai Jian, and have come to pay a visit by the command of Lord Desolate Eternity. Huai Jian cupped his fists in greeting. So you are Huai Jian. A voice rang out from ahead of them, but they could not see the speaker. The other was more than 30 meters away from them. Though Master has plans to take you as a disciple, why have you brought a group of people that have no business here? That person continued, carrying an overbearing tone. Huai Jian replied, this man's name is Ba, and he is the first place holder of the elite leaderboard of the 1000 Academy tournament this time. He is astonishingly talented in cultivation. I know Lord Desolate Eternity is most fond of nurturing the especially talented members of the younger generation, and have thus deliberately brought him here for Lord Desolate Eternity to take a look. First place of the elite leaderboard? The person on the opposing side released a scoff. A tournament that we, the heirs of a heavenly Venerate, have not taken part in is nothing but child's play, and you actually have the face to make such a declaration? He paused, and continued, Huai Jian, don't think that you can forget yourself just because Master has taken notice of you. It should be known that you will only be one of the 37 disciples that Master has taken. Moreover, you are not a disciple yet. Huai Jian couldn't help but look furious, and said, whether Lord Desolate Eternity wishes to take Ba as a disciple or not is naturally to be decided by Lord Desolate Eternity. Is there any need for you to make the decision here? How dare you? The person on the other side finally showed himself. This was a youth of the demon race. He had 4 horns on his head, which just happened to point in the 4 directions of north, south, east, and west. They were more than a foot long, which was extremely interesting. Hunyao couldn't help but set her eyes on his horns, clicking her tongue in amazement as she continued staring. That member of the demon race was displeased by her gaze, and couldn't help but shout, what are you looking at? Looking at how ugly you are. Hunyao exclaimed. Fuck. Killing intent immediately appeared on that demon's face. With a wave of his right hand, a battle spear 6 meters long appeared in his grasp. Wielding the battle spear, he stabbed it right at Hunyao without a second word. This spear strike was fast, accurate, and ruthless, bearing terrifying killing intent and might, which was enough to kill any ordinary 9th Lotus elite. Because he was a 9th Lotus First Leaf Monarch star, he had the battle prowess of the peak stage of a 9th Lotus Second Leaf. Hunyao had not even moved when Little Terror released a roar, and darted out of bewitching Maiden Rose arms, biting out at that battle spear. This was its mistress, and now that someone had made a move to attack her, it, as a loyal dog, naturally had to charge out in the lead. Now that it was on the topic, this mistress kept drooling as she stared at it. It actually did not very much want to leap out, but who asked it to be so loyal? With a clamp, Little Terror bit the battle spear, and was not letting go. Dumbfounded, the demon on the other side couldn't help but watch with shock. He was a Monarch star, a 9th Lotus First Leaf Monarch star, and those that could suppress him, aside from ancestral kings, would only have to be someone with battle prowess on the level of the 9th Lotus Third Leaf. But no matter how he looked at it, this newly born battle cub could not possibly be that kind of existence. However, his battle spear had fallen into the mouth of this little beast that looked so incredibly cute, and it was like it had grown roots. It could not be moved in the slightest, and no matter how hard or strongly he pulled, it was still useless. Hiss, this little beast's power was too terrifying, wasn't it? Little Terror showed its might. With a crack, it forcefully ripped through the battle spear. That demon took several steps back, his face filled with shock. It should be known that this battle spear was 7 stars pseudo-divine metal, practically close to the toughness he had when he was on full power defense, but Little Terror had still forcefully bitten through it. Just how unbelievable was that? Even if Little Terror had the upper hand, it had no plans to spare the opponent. It pounced one more, and launched a powerful offensive at that demon. The demon hurriedly parried, but because of his wariness of the sharpness of Little Terror's fangs, he actually did not dare to parry head-on, and could only continuously retreat as he battled. Huai Jian couldn't help but feel shocked. That demon was a 9th Lotus First Leaf, just like him. Though he was a supreme monarch star, and the demon might not be, the latter had cultivated a much longer time on the level of 9th Lotus than Huai Jian had. Thus, the battle prowess of the two of them was actually more or less the same. In other words, if it had been him, it would probably have been the same result. So this was that battle beast egg? Even if Huai Jian had always believed firmly in his own strength, he couldn't help but show a sliver of envy. Originally, it had been prepared for him, yet now it had become Ling Han's battle pet. This thought merely flashed past in his mind before disappearing. He was filled with confidence in himself once more. As long as he erased the Tao injury in his body, a great boost would take place in his battle prowess, and he would definitely be capable of suppressing Ling Han. Chapter 23:51, Jealousy. I refuse to believe this, that demon roared in fury. How could I, Si Huangyun, lose to a baby beast? From first look, he could tell that Little Terror had not been born very long ago. Its flame of life had only been burning for a limited period of time. If he lost to Little Terror, he would really become a massive joke. In the future, he would never be able to raise his head high and face others. He attacked madly, but Little Terror was a battle beast. The heaven and earth had given rise to it purely for the sake of battle. There was no need for it to learn anything else at all in future. It only had to act on its instincts. The little guy had a tough hide, practically reaching the height of 8 stars pseudo-divine metal, which could more or less ignore Si Huangyun's attacks, yet its attacks were incredibly harsh. As its tiny claws flourished, Si Huangyun's defense melted like snow that had encountered fire. This naturally made Si Huangyun extremely uncomfortable, and he continuously evaded, appearing very battered and exhausted. Only now did the Empress and the others truly know how powerful Little Terror could be. They were all stunned, and even Hunyao was pouting. Though she was an 11th secret monarch star, with her battle prowess comparable to small accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, she was not just a bit away from being capable of matching an opponent at great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier. There were 3 levels in the ascending origin tier, but there was a massive gap between each level. Even a monarch tier could only be invincible in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Only a monarch star could overcome the gap in cultivation level and crush a superior opponent. But Hunyao had not advanced to the ascending origin tier yet, so she could only vanquish all those at small accomplishment level of the ascending origin tier. Niao will work hard on cultivation, and advance into the ascending origin tier as soon as possible, then eat meat. This glutton's fiery fighting spirit was immediately ignited. For the sake of eating, she could suffer. Si Huangyun roared in fury. He really could not suppress Little Terror. The little guy was a born war machine, a tool for bloodshed. Acting cute was definitely not its strength. Stop, he shouted. If they continued fighting, he would lose, and it would be a terrible defeat. Ling Han merely chuckled, and did not say a word, having absolutely zero intention to call a halt to events. Huai Jian, too, crossed his arms over his chest, acting like he had not heard anything. Monarch stars like them all had great pride. Si Huangyun actually dared to treat them so lightly, which naturally made them very displeased. How could they not let him have a little suffering? When the robes covering Si Huangyun's arms and thighs had all become torn and tattered, only then did Huai Jian say to Ling Han, "Brother Ba, that's about enough, right?" Ling Han was still not satisfied. Sending out a thought, Little Terror immediately stopped attacking, and leaped backwards to return. It then curled up again in bewitching Maiden Ro's arms, as obedient as if it was a dog. Si Huangyun panted harshly. Now, he was really battered and exhausted. His initially lavish robes were now torn and tattered, he looked no different than a beggar. He glared harshly at Little Terror, which was immediately sensed by the creature, and the latter glared back angrily at him. Its mouth was again opened, revealing 2 rows of tiny fangs. Si Huangyun turned his head, and looked towards Ling Han. This was the real culprit. If you want to become Master's disciple, are you just going to depend on this beast pet? He demanded proudly. He could lose a battle, but definitely could not lose face. Ling Han couldn't help but grin. What is it? Are you jealous that I have something you don't? Si Huangyun humphed. He was a man that was destined to become an 18th Lotus ancestral king. Would he care about a mere beast pet? But it could not be denied that this beast pet was really very frightening. He was already a monarch star himself, yet was still no match for this beast pet. Was this little guy going to defy the heavens? Fight me, and if you can parry 100 moves from me, I will inform Exalted Master of your arrival. He stated his condition. Huai Jian flew into a rage. He was also a very proud man, and had always kept his word. He said that he would make introductions for Ling Han, yet the other man was obstructing them in all form and manner, and established conditions. This was an insult to him. Was he trying to take them a notch down? His eyes narrowed. On this matter, he was in the same boat as Ling Han. Si Huangyun, do you even have face? Ba is only an 8th lotus 11th leaf, yet you are a 9th lotus 1st leaf. How is he supposed to fight you? He shouted. Yet Si Huangyun showed absolutely no hint of embarrassment, and stated calmly, I do not demand that he defeat me. It is merely parrying 100 strikes. If he can't do even that, what right does he have to become Master's disciple? I will fight with you. Huai Jian declared. You? Si Huangyun chuckled. If you can parry 100 strikes from me, you naturally can also go to meet Master, but you cannot substitute for him. He pointed at Ling Han. Ling Han said smilingly, I hate it the most when others point their finger at me. So what about it? Si Huangyun demanded arrogantly. Then I'll just close the doors, and let the dog out. With a thought from Ling Han, Ling Terror immediately charged out again, and pounced at Si Huangyun. Pang, pang, pang. The moment the little guy was in battle, it was crazy. It would be ripping, biting, and chewing, completely aiming to dismember Si Huangyun. You are shameless. Si Huangyun hurriedly dodged left and right. He was deliberately bullying Ling Han, wanting to use his superior advantage of a major tier to deal with the latter, but he had not expected that Ling Han would not be falling for it at all. Instead, the latter had little terror step out in his place, which instantly made him feel very wounded. Pieces of fabric flew and scattered, and there was less and less cloth covering Si Huangyun. What should or should not be revealed was all exposed. Furthermore, Little Terror had also bitten his legs and behind a few times. Its teeth marks were distinct, and blood was dripping as Si Huangyun continuously let out yowls of pain. Actually, he was not someone with a weak will. Even if his bones broke and tendons tore, he would not even frown, but now his behind was being bitten by a wild beast. This feeling was completely different. Moreover, Little Terror's teeth were really too sharp, causing bone-deep pain with every bite. Ha 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 ha, junior brother Si Huangyun, why do you look so battered? Amidst a laugh, another person walked out. However, this time it was a youth of the angel race. Similarly, a 9th lotus was clear on his forehead, he was also a 1st leaf. Si Huangyun was tired from dodging, and could not even muster up the strength to refute him. However, his face was flushed red in extreme embarrassment and fury. This angel smiled at Huai Jian, and said, Junior brother Huai Jian, I am Feng Hailwan, Exalted Master's 32nd disciple. Greetings, senior brother Feng. Huai Jian also cupped his fists to pay respects. Feng Hailwan looked at Little Terror with envy. So this is the gift that Exalted Master has bestowed on junior brother? Even I am envious. He had heard of primordial battle beasts before. Though he was also very tempted, and wanted to possess one, would he dare speak of this to the heavenly Venerate? Realization dawned on Huai Jian. No wonder Si Huang Yun had verbally caused trouble for them from the very beginning. As it turned out, the reason lay here. Jealousy. He smirked coldly in his heart. A great monarch star would actually spend his energy on fits of jealousy. How was he then to ascend to the pinnacle of cultivation? No wonder the heavenly Venerate could not cultivate another heavenly Venerate from his disciples. Part of the reason was that these disciples had focused their efforts on contending for his favor. If they had a determination to become a heavenly Venerate, what need would there be to be concerned about external factors like a battle beast? After becoming a heavenly Venerate, what could they not obtain? Huai Jian shook his head with a smile, and replied, "This battle beast is not mine, but rather belongs to Brother Ba." N. Feng Haowan was surprised before showing a hint of displeasure. What our exalted master has bestowed on junior brother has actually passed on to another. Fuck, you are really too generous. Not even I have something so precious. Even if you had wanted to pass it to someone else, you should have passed it to another disciple of Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. What do you mean by giving it to an outsider? That's not it, Huai Jian said with a smile. This is what Brother Ba has won with his own abilities. He related the matter of the battle for the first place of the elite leaderboard, and admitted frankly that he had indeed lost to Ling Han, though the gap between them was really pitifully small. Feng Haowan's eyes lit up. Ba, right? Let us have a battle, and if you lose, you will have to give this battle beast over to me. Chapter 2352, Beaten Until Bursting. This was really too shameless. What was Feng Haowan's cultivation level? He was a 9th Lotus First Leaf, and a Monarch star at that. As for Ling Han, an 8th Lotus 11th Leaf. Even if they were both Monarch stars, wasn't there still a gap of a major tier between the two of them? Even if the 11th Leaf could barely be considered a 9th Lotus, Feng Haowan would still have the advantage of a minor level. What Monarch star could defeat another Monarch star with the gap of a minor level between them, especially when they were both on the level of the 9th Lotus? Wasn't this clearly snatching the battle beast by force? Huai Jian also faltered. You are also a Monarch star yourself, and still act so brazenly. So shameless. Senior brother Feng, this is Ba. I have deliberately brought him here to introduce him to Lord Desolate Eternity. Huai Jian's expression darkened. Feng Haowan smiled faintly in response. If the battle beast was in Huai Jian's possession, he would definitely not dare to snatch it by force. This was the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's arrangements. Who would dare go against the will of a Heavenly Venerate? But Ling Han was a different story altogether. Even if he really became the disciple of the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, that was still a future matter. Moreover, the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's attitude towards his disciples had always been leaving them alone. If you were strong enough, you could win what belonged to you. Ling Han had also snatched this battle beast from Huai Jian's possession, so it was natural that Feng Haowan could snatch it over for himself as well. In the future, if Ling Han had the ability, he could snatch it back as well. Of course, he would definitely suppress Ling Han continuously, not allowing him the opportunity to surpass himself. Junior brother Huai Jian, you still do not know the rules of our line of Desolate Eternity. I don't blame you, but you should not interfere in this matter. Feng Haowan said, his tone slightly severe. He was already putting on airs as a senior brother. Right at this moment, a commotion was actually heard from behind him, and very soon, the fog visibly parted, giving way to 3 people. They were Jing Zhongyue, Su Xing, and Shui Gu. They, too, held a small pendant, which was emanating light, dispelling the fog. Clearly, they had also gained the notice of the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, who had given them the key to ascend the divine Desolate Mountain. Why didn't Ling Han have one too? When they spotted Ling Han and Huai Jian, Jing Zhongyue and the others were also extremely surprised. You guys are, Feng Haowan's eyes swept over them. These three people were actually holding the token of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, which meant that he had another 3 junior brothers and junior sister, which also meant that the competition was becoming more intense. I am Shuaigu. I am Su Xing. I am Jing Zhongyue. Jing Zhongyue and the others introduced themselves, but their expressions were all proud, holding no hint of respect. This was the pride that belonged to a supreme monarch star. Feng Haowan's brow wrinkled in a frown, but he very soon set this matter aside, and turned his attention back to Ling Han. If you dare not fight me, scram off the mountain. Without the token of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity in Ling Han's possession, Feng Haowan absolutely had no need to show Ling Han any cordiality. Yet Huai Jian frowned, thinking that it was possible that he had accidentally caused a problem despite his good intentions. Since Jing Zhongyue and the others had all gotten the favor of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, then it was impossible that Ling Han, who was even stronger, had not. That only meant one thing, and that was the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity already knew that Huai Jian had brought Ling Han here, so he did not bother to manifest again just to bestow his token. But now that things had progressed to this point, it was too late for him to have any regrets. Jing Zhongyue and the others had not expected that they would encounter the scene of Ling Han facing off against the disciples of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity at their arrival, and couldn't help but feel greatly intrigued. But no matter how high their opinion of Ling Han was, they did not think that he could possibly be a match for Feng Haowan. It could not be helped, the gap in cultivation level was clearly obvious. Ling Han chuckled, yet the expression on his face became menacing. Since you are asking for a beating, I will just have to oblige you. Ha ha ha, what shameless boasting. Feng Haowan grinned in his fury. A mere 8th Lotus 11th Leaf actually dared to declare he was going to beat him up. Where did he get his courage from? Ling Han stretched out his right hand, and crooked a finger. If you want a beating, bring it on. Feng Haowan released a roar. Like a primordial monster emerging, it shook millions and millions of kilometers. He moved aggressively, and sent out a punch. Instantly, millions and millions of shooting stars crashed down from the skies, intending to kill Ling Han forcefully. In any case, Ling Han was not of their line, so what if he killed him? Did the disciple of a heavenly Venerate need any reason to commit murder? Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Bending his legs slightly, he suddenly bounced, instantly exploding with a frightening speed. Pang, pang, pang. One after another, the shooting stars crashed down, yet they were all shattered with a single punch from him. Huai Jian, Shuaigu, and the others all looked stunned. They knew that Ling Han was very strong, but no matter how strong he was, there had to be a limit. After all, he was only an 8th Lotus 11th Leaf. At maximum, his battle prowess would only be at the peak stage of the 9th Lotus 1st Leaf, but Feng Haowan's battle prowess had definitely reached 9th Lotus 2nd Leaf. This was a massive gulf that could not be breached. Yet Ling Han did not care what they were thinking. With him brandishing his fists continuously, the shooting stars that fell were all shattered with a single punch. He had already charged towards Feng Haowan, a fist aimed straight for the latter's face. Feng Haowan was also stunned and confused. In fact, he even felt an inconceivable chill. This kind of might was inconceivable in the eyes of a monarch star like him. However, he naturally couldn't possibly just receive this punch from Ling Han. He hurriedly shouted, and made his right hand's fingers bend like claws, which stabbed towards Ling Han. Boom! The two fighters' hands clashed together, instantly causing a frightening storm of energy that assaulted the skies, which turned into what seemed like furious dragons. Jing Zhongyue and the others couldn't help but widen their eyes. That was because Ling Han was really not at a disadvantage in this exchange. In fact, he was slightly enjoying the upper hand. There is no power of regulation. This is purely brute force. But how could that be? Without regulations, no matter how strong you were, it would still be useless, as it could not cause much damage. Huai Jian pondered quietly for a long while, and finally said, "No, he has still used regulations, yet it is a kind of regulation that we cannot comprehend. Were there any regulations like that? Jing Zhongyue exchanged looks with the others. But if that was not the case, they really could not accept the fact that pure brute force could actually contend against a ninth lotus first leaf monarch star. It should be known that even if the power of regulation was removed from an ancestral king, his battle prowess would only be at the level of the sixth lotus. Amidst their utter shock, Ling Han had already sent out a barrage of fists of fury, pummeling Feng Haowan endlessly. What had he done? First, it was Si Huangyun, and now it was Feng Haowan. Did they all think that he was an easy target to bully? If so, he would have to burst out. Huai Jian and the others had all gone mad. Feng Haowan had actually fallen into a disadvantage, and it was an absolute disadvantage at that, with Ling Han suppressing him completely in battle. This kind of battle prowess had to be about the peak stage of the ninth lotus second leaf, right? Huai Jian swallowed with much difficulty. He was a ninth lotus first leaf monarch star, and was a supreme monarch star at that. Even if he had just advanced into this level, he only possessed the battle prowess of the early stage ninth lotus second leaf. But this was also his limit. To explode with even stronger battle prowess, he could only use powerful moves. As for Ling Han, even if he was constantly using powerful moves, he should not be so powerful still. And to think that he actually said that he did not want to suppress Ling Han with his superior cultivation level, but from the look of things now, if the two of them really were to fight, would he be able to withstand 100 moves from Ling Han? Pang! 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 Ling Han exploded. He drew close to Feng Haowan, and every punch he delivered was like the intense collision of endless great stars, blasting Feng Haowan to the point of throwing up blood non-stop. Crack! His fist landed on Feng Haowan's face, and forcefully crushed half of his face. Even his bones had been crushed into dust. The man's countenance completely turned into a mess of blood and flesh. What bit of the dashing and handsome good looks that a member of the angel race had was left on him? Ling Han continued the attack with a knee. Pang! A muffled sound was heard from within Feng Haowan's body. That was the sound of various internal organs inside his body being crushed. Chapter 2353, Human. Feng Haowan screamed in pain as his vitality declined greatly. He had long since cultivated the mystery realms of the body, but now they were forcefully destroyed by Ling Han, which naturally caused him serious injuries. What are you howling for? Weren't you speaking very tough? Ling Han tossed him onto the ground, and a crack was heard with a forceful stomp. Feng Haowan instantly released a harsh cry. His left leg had been forcefully broken, the broken bone exposed, red and white all over. How does it feel to be bullied? Ling Han followed with another stomp. Feng Haowan's right leg was also broken, the part of his knee directly sunk in. Only a bit of torn flesh was left connected to his calf. Fun, right? Ling Han smirked coldly, raising his foot high. This time, he was aiming straight for the place between Feng Haowan's legs. Feng Haowan was almost crazy with panic. Being injured by an elite of Ling Han's level would leave behind extremely serious after-effects. For example, he would need at least a few thousand years to heal his broken bones, if a heavenly Venerate or ancestral king did not interfere. And if his crotch was stomped on, it was a small matter that he would not be able to use his D*CK for a few thousand years. More importantly, the psychological humiliation would mean that he would be living in a nightmare for the rest of his life. On the other side, Little Terror had also pounced on Si Huangyun, harshly biting into his bottom. Si Huangyun was in so much pain that he was sprawled out on the ground. He was continuously kicking out with his legs, as if it was better for him to die than be alive at this moment. This man and beast, or master and servant, were really both too powerful. Hee, as expected of the champion of the elite leaderboard of the 1000 Academy tournament, impressive. Applause rang out, and a young girl from the demon race appeared. Her features were actually quite delicate, but accompanied with the looks of the demon race, she still did not match the aesthetic values of Ling Han and the others. However, Su Xing's eyes immediately lit up. He was a genuine member of the demon race. Ling Han's foot was still planted on Feng Haiwan, but his eyes turned towards this girl from the demon race, and his gaze involuntarily became tense. This was a 9th Lotus Second Leaf Elite. Zi Shuang. This girl from the demon race pointed at herself. She possessed an incredibly voluptuous figure, shapely and seductive. Though she still had a tail, it was still a uniquely beautiful sight. Junior brother Ba, you're not really thinking of killing these junior brothers of mine, right? She laughed lightly, as if she had absolutely no plans to save Si Huangyun and Feng Haiwan. Yet Feng Haiwan and Si Huangyun were both very aware. The competition between them, the people under the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, was incredibly intense, especially when they were of the same cultivation level because their cultivation resources were similar, which would definitely mean a harsh contest between them. This was also the deliberate arrangement of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. This was just like raising Gu, where only the strongest elite would stand out from the rest one. Ling Han smiled slightly, and replied, "This man intended to kill me. Why can't I kill him? This is my junior brother. If you kill him, I can only kill you." Zi Shuang sighed, appearing to feel very regretful. This woman was very interesting. She made no mention of wanting to save Feng Haiwan, but rather only spoke of revenge. She was practically saying that she did not care at all about this junior brother, but because they were both of the Desolate Eternity's line, she had to do something, and eliminate his murderer. Moreover, even if I am no match for you, there are still 7 senior brothers and 2 senior sisters here. 7 of them are 9th Lotus Third Leaf, and 2 have already ascended to become ancestral kings. Junior brother Ba, are you going to kill everyone? She looked at Ling Han with her large eyes, which were shining brightly. In the eyes of a member of the demon race like herself, Ling Han was extremely handsome. Ling Han's demeanor was grave and stern, and though his body art had surpassed his cultivation level, it could match early stage 9th Lotus Third Leaf at most. It would be delusional to hope for even the slightest bit more. To say nothing of ancestral kings, even a 9th Lotus Third Leaf Monarch star was enough trouble for him to contend with. However, he was not the kind of person that was used to threats either. With him exerting slight force with his foot, Feng Haiwan was instantly waving his limbs with all his might. Ling Han had placed his foot on the latter's throat, and a frightening pressure was transmitted, making him feel like death was really just around the corner. Junior brother Ba. Zi Shuang switched her expression, and smiled genially. In the future, we will all be family. A family naturally has to be harmonious, don't you think so? A smile slowly appeared on Ling Han's face as he said, "Senior sister is right." He slowly withdrew his foot, while Little Terror immediately loosened its fangs with a cry. With a leap, it darted next to his feet, rubbing against his leg, and looking completely like a cute pet that was begging for a rub. Zi Shuang showed a hint of wariness. Not only did Ling Han have heaven-defying strength, he could be flexible as well, and did not have the stubborn pride that an ordinary monarch star would usually have. If this kind of person became an enemy, that would be very, very troublesome. This is a wise action. She smiled dazzlingly. Under the banner of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, there were a total of 19 disciples that were at the 9th Lotus. They all had a competitive relationship with one another, but if they fought alone, it was extremely likely that others would ally together to target them. Hence, she, too, wished to seek an ally, and as someone who was also of the demon race, and whose strength was incredibly powerful, Ling Han naturally was a very good candidate. Ling Han smiled as well. "Thank you for the compliment, senior sister. Follow me up the mountain, all of you." Zi Shuang did not even cast a second look at Si Huangyun and Feng Haiwan. As long as they were not dead, she couldn't be bothered to care. She led the way ahead of them, her behind swaying accompanied by captivating seduction. Even if they were angel race, holy beast, or insect race, they could not deny that this woman's figure was really extremely hot. There was no need to speak of Su Xing here, as his eyes had not been lifted from her all this while. It was no wonder that he would be attracted. There were not many monarch stars that could be worthy of him, and it was naturally even more difficult to find a beauty who was also from the demon race. No one gave any regard to Feng Hailwan and Si Huangyun. After a long while, they finally managed to get back to their feet. One was covered all over with bite wounds, while the other had both his legs broken, his abdomen ripped through, and at least half his head missing. If I don't exact revenge, I will die. I will definitely tear this brat to pieces. The two of them made a declaration with gritted teeth. Exchanging a look, they both smirked. On the other side, Ling Han and his group followed Zi Shuang up the mountain, and after traveling for a very long while, the fog finally dispersed. Everyone stowed their respective tokens as well. Zi Shuang didn't use a token, for there was no such need. The line of Desolate Eternity had cultivated a unique cultivation technique, so they would not be affected by this fog. Otherwise, even an 18th Lotus Ancestral King would lose his way here. Because this was something set up by a heavenly Venerate. Come, have some tea first. Exalted Master's real self has been cultivating all this while, and he has left behind a sliver of thought that has been roaming outside his body. He should be returning in a few days. Zi Shuang smiled as she received them. This was a drawing room, and was not all that glorious or splendid, but it had an imposing air. In the drawing room, all the furniture was made of stone. It appeared to be shockingly old, exuding a feeling of age and history. Tea! Zi Shuang shouted lightly, and a servant came not too long after, bearing a tea tray. Ling Han and the others all looked surprised. It was not how astonishing this servant looked, or how exceedingly high his cultivation level was, but rather that this person was actually a human. A human. In the territory of the foreign realm, a human had actually appeared. This was a man that looked to be in his 30s. Docile and submissive, he looked completely like a loyal slave. Ling Han's heart involuntarily clenched. He had never expected that he would see a human here, and judging from the look of things, he seemed to have long forgotten the grudge with the foreign realm, and was filled with subservience. Chapter 2354, Savage. Why would there be trash from a super low-level dimension here? Su Xing was the first to ask. Firstly, he was indeed curious, and secondly, he was deliberately trying to strike up a conversation with Zi Shuang. This question voiced the confusion in everyone's hearts, and they all turned to look towards Zi Shuang. Oh, when Exalted Master personally arrived in the super low-level dimension of the celestial realm, he killed innumerable elites, and at the same time also captured some. They are the descendants of those human elites, Zi Shuang said calmly. It was clear that she had since lost her curiosity. Why is it necessary to keep these pieces of trash alive? Shuegu asked as he bared his mouth, revealing a bloodthirsty expression of cruelty. That trash was only worthy of being his food. Smiling, Zi Shuang replied, Master wishes to study these humans. Who knows, he may be able to find some way for us to be unafraid of the restrictions placed on us by the heaven and earth of that realm. What, Lord Desolate Eternity actually has such a great ability? Everyone was stunned. Aside from Ling Han and the others, they all looked excited. The foreign realm was stronger than the celestial realm, yet had not been able to conquer the celestial realm even after so many years because, firstly, the regulations of the two realms were different, so they could not fight too long, and secondly, after they entered into the celestial realm, they would be restricted by the power of heaven and earth of the celestial realm. If this second problem could be resolved, the elites of the foreign realm would be able to penetrate deeply, and use their advantage in numbers and quality to eliminate a great majority of the beings of the celestial realm. In this manner, the heaven and earth of the celestial realm would also be severely wounded, and the heaven and earth of the foreign realm would be able to easily devour the celestial realm. This was a realm war. To eliminate a realm, it was necessary to eliminate all the living beings of this realm. Otherwise, even if several dozen or over 100 heavenly venerates joined forces, they could not possibly be a match for the heaven and earth itself. It was unknown if there were even stronger heavenly venerates in high-level dimensions that could truly defeat the heaven and earth. Yet Ling Han's heart throbbed widely. The foreign realm was really working tirelessly to invade the celestial realm. If the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity really succeeded, there would definitely be no worse news for the celestial realm than this. Thankfully, now that the two-realm passageway was hindered, and the storm of energy raged like an ocean, even an 18th Lotus ancestral king could not pass through. Even if a heavenly venerate barged through forcefully, they would be severely wounded, and once they were further targeted by the heaven and earth, they would probably be forcefully killed. Hence, there was at least several tens of billions of years that the celestial realm was still safe. That super low-level dimension thinks that just because the storm of energy is there as a barrier, we would have to wait several tens of billions of years, right? Su Xing smirked coldly. There has long since been several heavenly venerates that have been dealing with that. At most in a billion years, we will definitely be able to sweep aside the storm of energy, and begin the war once more. Senior Sister Zi Shuang, how long is Lord Desolate Eternity away from success? Jing Zhongyue asked. I am not sure about that either. Zi Shuang shook her head. However, from the occasional words that Exalted Master has spoken, it is probably a matter of just a few dozen billion years or so. Everyone was excited. Compared with a realm war that would last for epochs, several dozen billion years was really just the blink of the eye. Ling Han's heart clenched. He had been too optimistic. He had not thought that the heavenly venerates of the foreign realm would be so proactive in the invasion. True, they, too, were being attacked by the dark inverse realm. If they did not conquer the celestial realm as soon as possible, they themselves would be done for. The heavenly venerates of the celestial realm are also working together with us, speeding up the dispersal of the energy storm, Zi Shuang continued. This was a piece of incredibly shocking news. Ling Han, too, could not help but raise a brow, feeling an urge to curse. It was enough that the heavenly venerates of the celestial realm offered no resistance, they actually helped the foreign realm to undermine the celestial realm's forces. What was the meaning of this? The expressions of Hu Niu and the other women also shifted greatly, but Huai Jian and the others did not show any change in expression. It seemed as if this kind of news was very normal for them. It looked like the betrayal of the heavenly venerates of the celestial realm was no secret in the foreign realm at all. Otherwise, everyone would certainly be exclaiming and look surprised when they heard this kind of information. Presently, the expressions of Huai Jian and the others were clearly normal, and it was too normal at that. Esteemed guests, please have tea. That human servant served aromatic tea to each of them, his demeanor respectful. Ling Han sighed internally. This person should have been brainwashed with the mentality of a slave since birth. To say nothing of merely serving tea now, even if he was commanded to go into the battlefield and kill his celestial realm companions, he would surely execute the command without any hesitation. Senior Sister Zi Shuang, do you have a lot of such servants here? Shui Gu suddenly asked. A great many. Zi Shuang nodded. Then I will not hold myself back. Shui Gu said, suddenly turning into his original form. With a flash, he had turned into a bloody streak, darting into the head of that human. That human did not even have the chance to groan. His legs directly weakened as he collapsed loudly onto the ground. The gap between their cultivation levels and strength was really too wide. Xiao, with another flash, Shui Gu leaped out of the forehead of that human once more, returning to his human form. He licked his lips and said, though the celestial realm is backwards, the taste of the beings that the realm nurtures isn't too bad. Furthermore, we can gain a sliver of the regulations of the heaven and earth by devouring their souls and brain juice. If the amount is sufficient and quality is good enough, we will have a chance to cultivate the regulations of that heaven and earth. His sudden burst into murder was too fast, and even Ling Han had not managed to stop him in time. He had really not imagined that Shui Gu would actually be so deranged. In the eyes of the beings of the foreign realm, what difference was there between the beings of the celestial realm and normal food? I have absolutely no interest in consuming those filthy beings. We had best wait for Lord Desolate Eternity to create the secret technique, and enter into the celestial realm after cultivating it, Jing Zhongyue said. By then, we should become ancestral kings too. I do not mind myself, Su Xing said, revealing a sinister expression. Shuegu was just about to speak, when pang, a punch landed heavily on his face. It just happened to land on his mouth, and he immediately spluttered out a mouthful of blood, half of his teeth broken. He looked at Ling Han in shock, his mouth wide and his eyes filled with doubt and fury. Why had you hit me? Why? Did I trifle with you? Ling Han withdrew his fist and stated calmly, I suddenly thought you looked very detestable, so I hit you. What is it? Dissatisfied? Fuck, of course I am. Shuegu almost roared, yet forcefully suppressed the urge. So what if he was dissatisfied? So what if he fought with all his might? Was there any chance he could defeat Ling Han? Ling Han was indeed unreasonable, but the most important thing in this world was strength. You could only make the rules if you were strong enough. I will remember this, he said as he gritted his remaining teeth, gritting his teeth so tightly that there were cracks heard. Ling Han was completely unconcerned. Because he would not see anyone from the celestial realm after entering into the foreign realm, he had not witnessed any scenes of the residents of the foreign realm slaughtering beings of the celestial realm, so he had temporarily forgotten about the savage nature of the living creatures of the foreign realm. But in truth, this was the disdain, contempt, hatred, and thinking that beings of the celestial realm were only their toys and food that was rooted in their bloodlines. It would never change. In this moment, Ling Han really wanted to kill Shuegu, but this kind of action would be too rash. He could not just look at the details, and forget about the bigger picture. Killing one Shuegu would not be able to solve the problem for the celestial realm. After the death of this Shuegu, the foreign realm still had 1,000 or 10,000 Shuegu that could even be 10 or even 100 times more savage and crueler than Shuegu. After he became a heavenly Venerate, he would turn the entire foreign realm upside down. Huai Jian and the others were also very confused. This punch from Ling Han was really too inconceivable, and even Zi Shuang felt surprised. Though the internal strife in the line of the Desolate Eternity was very intense, this kind of irrational attack was still too bizarre. Chapter 2355, Ji Kong. Have tea. Zi Shuang said smilingly, lightly switching the topic from how Shuegu had been hit. Firstly, that was the common practice of the line of Desolate Eternity. If it was a grudge between two people of equal cultivation level, it would be settled on their own, and elites were forbidden from interfering. Secondly, she was more biased towards Ling Han as well. This was a man that she looked very highly upon. Thus, Shuegu could only wear a dark expression, and vent his anger on the tea. Gulping the tea down, his tea was soon finished, and he then demanded, "Where are the servants? Where is my tea?" Zi Shuang clapped her hands, and a human immediately walked over, asking respectfully, "Miss Zi Shuang, what is your command?" Though the body of his companion was just lying in front of him, he acted as if he had seen nothing. Ling Han sighed internally. These people had long since become numb. "Serve some tea," Zi Shuang said. "And while you're at it, dispose of the corpse." "Yes, Miss Zi Shuang." That human nodded respectfully, and took away the body first. After a while, he returned bearing tea. Shuegu stretched out a hand, and was just about to drink from the teacup he had lifted when his face suffered another punch. Instantly, all the contents of his teacup was poured onto his face, and he jumped to his feet in fury. He shouted at Ling Han, "What exactly do you mean by this? I just don't like how you look. Is this reason sufficient?" Ling Han looked back at him, his eyes menacing. Shuegu very much wanted to fly into battle, but when he recalled Ling Han's frightening battle prowess, he couldn't help but suppress his fury, and began to drink his tea grumpily. Zi Shuang looked at Ling Han in shock. In her eyes, Ling Han was a very flexible person, and should be very subtle, only doing things after much consideration. Why was he suddenly targeting Shuegu for no reason? She couldn't help but hesitate internally, and decided that she would not form an alliance with Ling Han for now. What if this guy was a great troublemaker? She would then be drawing fire to herself, which would be truly unwise. Thinking of this, she was no longer in the mood to entertain them, and thus had the servants bring them to rest at the guest courtyard to wait for the summons of the heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. Ling Han roamed casually on the mountain. As long as he did not descend the mountain, or fly too far away from the mountain, there would be no fog surrounding him. In this place, he discovered a great many human slaves. The weakest was not even in the shattering void tier, and the strongest had reached 9th lotus. They were all cultivating the celestial technique of the foreign realm. They could not sense the power of heaven and earth of the celestial realm here, so it was natural that they were unable to cultivate regulations, and could only switch to the cultivation system of the foreign realm. Ling Han summoned a random person, and decided to make some queries. Go Chi greets young master. This human was a middle-aged man in his 30s, a 5th lotus blooming on his forehead. He was of medium build, and quickly sprinted over to Ling Han, appearing very ingratiating. Go Chi 1? Ling Han's eyes flickered again. Even the names given to them were so low-grade and base, which showed how pitiful the status of humans was here. Don't you have any other names? Ling Han asked. Go Chi looked blank. What other name? Was there any need to have 2 names? Though he was slightly confused, he still shook his head. No. For people like you, how many in total are there here? Ling Han asked. Over 10,000 or so, Go Chi answered. Then, he immediately said very proudly, I have passed through many levels of assessment, and finally became an A-grade slave. Hence, please believe me, young master. My service will definitely satisfy you. An involuntary grief rose up in Ling Han's heart. The man actually gained a feeling of superiority from being a slave. It was clear that this was brainwashing that had carried on for generations. Do you know where your ancestors originate from? Ling Han asked. I do. It is a place filled with sin, and every person there deserves to die. Lord Desolate Eternity has very kindly taken our ancestors here, so we must be slaves for many generations to redeem ourselves, Go Chi said with much fear. Ling Han shook his head, and was in no mood to ask further. He waved his hand, dismissing the other party. Go Chi was slightly fearful, and also felt slightly blank. Ling Han had summoned him over just to ask so many strange questions. Was it because the former felt some displeasure about him? The pillar of support for his life was to be of service to the beings of the foreign realm. If this sacred mission was taken from him, his life would lose all meaning. Ling Han walked some way further, and saw a stone statue ahead of him. This was an insect race member that had the form of a mantis. Who knew how long it had been here as it was covered with dust? He couldn't help but cast a second look at it, a strange feeling rising up in his heart. Vaguely, he could feel that there was something off, but no matter what, he could not figure out what was off about it. This is a living creature with vitality index as high as 10,000 points. Wally's voice suddenly rang out in Ling Han's mind. Ordinary communication through divine sense could possibly be intercepted by elites, but Wally's communication definitely could not. According to him, he had used some kind of power that surpassed regulations to further code it, and it was impossible that anyone could intercept the message. Finally, Ling Han realized what was odd. As it turned out, this insect race statue was actually a living being, and was a supreme existence that had the battle prowess of a 15th Lotus ancestral king at that. He stopped walking and bowed to pay his respects to the stone statue, saying, "Greetings, senior." This status trembled, its eyes slowly opening. Instantly, a frightening aura surged out, pressure descending like a mountain, as if even divine metal could not bear up against this pressure. "Youth, your insight is not too bad." A voice rang out from the statue, filled with a metallic trait. Hi's figure trembled slightly, and dust fell off continuously, revealing his true self. He was completely golden, and actually did not have the disgusting vibe given off by the insect race. Merely 8th lotus 11th leaf, and you can actually see through to my real self. Tisk. He appeared very curious. Just how exactly have you managed to do so? Naturally, it is because Senior is too captivating in bearing, which cannot be concealed at all. Ling Han babbled complete nonsense. Naturally, he could not possibly reveal Wally's existence. This insect race laughed loudly, and did not proceed to interrogate Ling Han further. Everyone had their own secrets, and he naturally would not disdain to compel a minor character of merely 8th lotus. I am Ji Kong, Master's 8th disciple. Unfortunately, I have followed Master for several epochs, yet has still not managed to become an 18th lotus. He shook his head, seeming very disappointed. This is the place of seclusion for Master. I am cultivating here, borrowing a sliver of Master's heavenly venerable tier aura, and perhaps may be able to break through to 16th lotus. Ling Han was surprised. Could it be that not all of heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's disciples were Monarch stars? As long as they were Monarch stars, and did not make any wrong turns on their path of cultivation, they would definitely be able to become 18th lotus ancestral kings in the future. Ji Kong laughed loudly. Though there is no shortage of Monarch stars among Master's disciples, not all of them are Monarch stars. Many years ago, Master has attempted to boost people whose aptitude is the most ordinary to the height of the 18th lotus ancestral king, and I had the fortune to be taken as Master's disciple. Initially, even becoming a 9th lotus would have been difficult for me, but through Master's teachings, I have now actually become a 15th lotus ancestral king. Unfortunately, I have still disappointed Exalted Master. Ling Han was internally stunned. The heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity truly had astonishing ways and frightening foals. First, he wanted to make it so that every single person of the foreign realm would no longer have to fear being weakened by the heaven and earth of the celestial realm, and now he wanted to turn a person with ordinary aptitude into an 18th lotus ancestral king. If he were to succeed, the overall strength of the foreign realm would reach a frightening level. Thankfully, Ji Kong was still a 15th lotus after cultivating for who knew how many years, and this was the result even with the dedicated guidance of a heavenly Venerate. It looked like it was not very possible that this goal would be achieved. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.